You want to drive faster? Listen in as Kinch Rendell, an SCCA National Trophy winner and multi-time Pro Solo champion himself, interviews the best autocrossers in the land. He talks fast and drives even faster. And now here's your host, Kinch Rendell.
This week's episode features none other than Andrew Pallotta. He was featured in Sports Car. Not in it. I should say in it and on it. He's on the cover. Why would they put him on the cover? He was Solo Nationals Driver of the Year. Also 2014 Solo Nationals Rookie of the Year. He's won several national championships as well as Pro Solo championships. How about 2016 G Street, both Solo Nationals and Pro Solo. 2015 E-Stock and MR2. 2014 National Champion in STX and the Scion FRS. And in 2010, kind of his breakout year there, STU National Championship in the Mitsubishi Evo 8. It wasn't his car. As you'll hear us talk a little bit, I think it still had the stock battery, stock seats. It wasn't the lightest car. He's that good. Listen in, let us know what you think. What stands out to you? Enjoy. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kinch, how's it going?
Hey, going great. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I've been a big fan of this since I guess I started with the Brian Peters episode and have been listening to pretty much everyone since then. So a long-time listener, first-time caller, I guess.
Yeah, that's what another thing I've told people. I hope to get people back. One thing I'm kind of hoping people that are listening will do is send us questions. Like maybe you're going to hear something here and have a question for Andrew. Yes, he could answer it on the side, but also if we get it recorded, maybe something where Andrew just calls back in and just answers some questions. That's something I've found from other podcasts that's kind of popular. If we got 10 or 15 questions, Andrew can take a few minutes, call in and answer some questions. So anybody listening, you got questions, write them down, let us know.
Yeah, for sure.
So Andrew, take us back to when you got into autocrossing.
Well, I started back, I think I had just gotten out of high school at the time, so this was around 2005. I had an MR2 turbo at the time, and I'd always been into cars. I've always been into cars since I was a little kid. So, ever since I could speak or walk, I always loved cars and going fast and stuff like that. A buddy of mine, who I'm still good friends with now, Joe Blaha, he's out of the Ohio region. He got me started and finally talked me into going out to an event. And I sucked, as normally you would at your first event. And to be honest with you, I wasn't even really that hooked on it at the time. I was just getting out of high school, going into college. I was like, yeah, this is neat, but I don't really have all that much time or all that much money to really do it, and I was just kind of dipping my toes in the water. So I had done a couple other events through 2006, and maybe did one event that year, and then 2007 started getting into a little bit more. So I had a couple cars through that time period. So I'm kind of the hack Tom Reynolds. I've had a bunch of different cars, not as many as he is, but I get sufficiently bored of them about once a year. So between that 2005-2007 period, I had a bunch of cars, got bored with them, sold them. I bought a 240 SX and autocrossed that locally and uncompetitively in street mod. And then in 2008, I finally got finally started making big boy money, and finally bought my first real autocross car, which was an Evo 9. I knew I wanted to run it in STU, so I started prepping it for that, and started running it a lot. Tried to run as many events as I could, locally at least. Did all kinds of prep to it. I didn't cut any corners on prep to it. I had 2 sets of motons on it. All different sets of wheels and tunes and all kinds of fun stuff on it. Got bored of it. And then 2009, I went to the Toledo Pro Solo, which was my first national event. So Again, didn't do terribly well there at that point. I think I was like second to last, but that was really kind of where I really got hooked, was the ProSolo format. And from there, it kind of took off. So 2010, I started doing a lot more national events. The Evo ended up getting sidelined because one of the strut housings on the shocks basically cracked, and there was no replacement for Moton in the country. So the car was pretty much out of commission all season, and just jumped in different people's cars. Did reasonably well, did mid-pack maybe at most events. But I was frustrated because I'm really competitive by nature, and I wanted to do well, and it was bothering me that I just couldn't figure out how to do well. And that year was the first year I decided to go to nationals. So come around July, early August, I was really like, I'm going to go to nationals, and I really want to try it because everybody says how great it is, how much fun it is. I'm like, I'm just going to go out there and have fun and not even, put too much thought into it. And I'm like, well, whatever. And then after that, then we'll see. If I don't do that well, then maybe I'll just find something else to do. I'll start doing track days or whatever. So I talked to Nick Myers and got set up with a co-drive in a car that I was at least familiar with, another STU Evo, and went out there and ended up actually winning. I didn't expect that at all. In fact, I was expecting that to so not happen. I didn't even register for any contingency. So there's pictures of that car driving around 2010 with nothing on it but a tire rack banner, the event sticker, and numbers and class.
Was that the white car?
Yeah, that was the white one.
Did it have a stock battery?
Yes, it had stock. It has sunroof too.
Yeah, exactly. The wrong car on decent shocks, I seem to remember, was the story. With the co-driver, you hopping in it and winning.
Yeah, it was on. And it was on like single adjustable Öhlins. The diff wasn't redone because eventually people figured out you could redo the rear diffs in the STU Evos because of how they're set up in the service manual. I'm not sure if that was actually known at the time, but it definitely wasn't done on that car. And then, it was stock battery. It was sunroof. It was an 03, so it was the slow one. Oh,
with no front limited slip.
Yeah, no front limited slip, and the regular, I guess the Evo 8 engine with the small turbo, so no Myvec, and it was not the fastest car in the world.
So what you didn't tell us was somewhere between starting and there, an alien took over, or you became an alien. Something happened. They took you away, brought you back.
Something clicked. Yeah, something clicked at Nationals, and maybe it was me taking the pressure off of myself.
I was going to ask you, how much of that, I read in the article for Sports Car, that you're like, I had no expectations, so you went in there probably loose as a goose.
Yeah, I didn't care. I'm like, hey, I'm against all these guys that have been beating the crap out of me, and I've been seeing them beat the crap out of everybody else. Like Colin Fiedler, and I think Corey Ritchik, I think, may have been running BSP at the time, but Brandon Ranvek, and all these guys have been doing really well, and I'm just like, these guys are going to beat me. And taking that pressure off apparently seemed to help. And again, something must have clicked, or the car just was working for me those 2 days. But yeah, so that was
Ohio. The ProSolo hooked you, and then obviously reading that article, you were thinking you might not do it anymore. As you just mentioned, you might do track days or something. Take us back to, you said you've been competitive. What did you before? Like, were you in sports? Did you play video games? Did you race? Did you go-kart?
No, I didn't really do it. I've always been a big nerdy video gamer, so I've always done that. So, but I've never been like all that competitive in it. I know that if Tom or Kyle Herbst are listening to this right now, they're going to say I'm crazy for saying that. But that was it just kind of came out of nowhere. But maybe that's what kind of ended up driving me towards becoming better was, starting out with like that little bit of level of wanting to be competitive, and then turning that into, trying to figure out mistakes and trying to become better and trying to learn things. And somehow it just sort of came together.
Yeah. So, and one thing I always like to talk about is seat time. It sounds like at first you raced a little bit, then maybe made one race in 1 year, had lots of different cars in between 2005, 2007, got your first real car, 2008, the STU car. Did you start hitting an event a month, 2 events a month? What did it look like back then?
We had enough. So I wasn't even in part of SCCA till about 2009. In Ohio, we actually had a pretty good non-SCCA club regimen there. So we could usually run between that and the SCCA clubs. I could almost run once per weekend per month. So usually 3 or 4 events a month. Sometimes more than that if there were 2 2-day events.
And how many runs were you guys getting per event then?
Oh geez, back then we might have gotten 6 to 8 runs a day. So it's not like the level of the Californian guys where they go and do 37 runs on Saturday and then do 106 on Sunday or whatever it is that they do. But it was definitely more than where I'm at now. But yeah, I think that was probably helped as opposed to doing a couple weekends a year or 4 or 5 in a season.
Exactly that. So seat time, you got a decent amount of seat time, and what did you try also outside of just the seat time to really start improving? What different tactics and steps did you take?
Well, here's the thing, and I think this helps, and I'm sure there's going to be people who disagree. Playing like race simulators was huge. I think you mentioned earlier you talked to Tom O'Gorman. If you get a chance to talk to Brian Heitcotter, I think that they're probably going to agree too that there's definitely a lot of crossover between those things. So like I said, I've always been a big nerdy video gamer, and what I wasn't doing, when I was really starting to get into racing was going online and playing Gran Turismo or something with my buddies, and I got relatively decent at that. But the mechanics all work the same. So if you have the right setup, the right wheel, the right pedals. I had like a clutch setup and a shifter and all that stuff. The physical mechanics carry over pretty well, even if the physics aren't always the most realistic thing in the world. But I definitely think that helped contribute that, because that factors back into seat time. So you have all these autocross events during the weekend, but during the week I get home from work and don't have to do anything for school. So hey, I'll spend 1 or 2 hours and just lap Laguna Seca in a MX-5 Cup car or something for a little while, and try to figure out that and play with the settings and try to learn things from that. So I definitely think that was a big contributor.
That really stood out to me interviewing Tom. And luckily, just this past week, I now have a wheel. I don't have a shifter. I only have 2 pedals. But a local group here said, hey, every Wednesday in the off season, we're going to race. So I went out there and lost, as did last in whichever car I was driving. But I was amazed. I'm with these feedback wheels now, I was like, wow, okay, when I turn everything off, all the nannies off, I can really feel it. And kind of, Tom pointed out, and tell me what you make of this, he really thinks he learned to catch a car quickly and to catch any car or be able to hop into any car, because as soon as the video moves that the car is angling, he knew he needed to countersteer, basically. And that's what I picked up really quickly. I'm like, wow, this can help you, and also you get that feedback on the wheel.
Yeah, you pick up sort of the visual cues of, when a car starts to slide or starts to push, or, the relative, what the car does versus your inputs. It's funny too. This is kind of non sequitur here, but it's funny because that was actually how I met Tom. Was we were playing R Factor, and we were playing some like classic touring cars or something, and I was in a Mini and he was a Corvette, and he ran me off the road, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that's the Tom O'Gorman that had just won the Peru Tour like a month or two prior, because I think this was like 2008 or 2009, and it turned out that was the case. But it was kind of fun. It was kind of funny how we had that interaction before, either of us, I think, were really autocrossing at that time. And I had actually, and you know what, I actually had a similar interactions with Brian Highcotter, because we were both in a league, and again, I didn't really know him, and he definitely didn't know me at the time, but we had a few races there together.
Yeah, this is standing out to me. And years ago, I asked the wife, I'm like, you think it'd be cool if I got a game system? Like, you've never seen me play games. Like, I gave that up before we met. I learned that lesson. I said, but just for racing. And she said yes, but it took me until about 3 months ago to finally get an Xbox One.
Yeah.
And I just got the wheel last week, basically. And it's like, wow. But luckily, I'm already excited because my 7-year-old is kind of taken to it. I'm like, yes, this is how we get you back in that go-kart that you seem a little tentative to get back in. Is you'll be figuring it out here first. Right.
And yeah, I mean the place to be is on PC, because you have iRacing and Assetto Corsa and some of the better, more realistic sims. I mean, those are usually the Wednesday night or Thursday night league type of things. With iRacing, I know there's a few that have been. A few in my area that are going on. I'm not really participating in them right now, but
we don't want you to if we're in your class. Everybody's like, no, please don't. Just take most of the year off and just show up like David Fouth right at the end and try.
Yeah, thankfully I suck a lot more at online racing. Autocross, somehow I seem to make it work, but
and that's also making it work. You've been in all these different cars, and I always at least credited myself saying, hey, I stuck with that Integra forever. So I really did figure out front-wheel drive in my mind anyway. But then it's like you and Tom O'Gorman, you guys can jump in cars, jump in other people's cars, and I'm like, wow, at this point now I'm like, I wish I would do more of that. And I think a lot of it actually, I'm telling myself, if I'll play the video games and hop in all these cars, that's probably the best and easiest seat time I can get before I actually go get in a Corvette or something else.
Yeah, and jumping in different cars is definitely helps. I mean, I don't have any reservations. I'll drive the biggest piece of crap you can find, just because I feel like that's learning. I mean, I feel like I'm never at the point where I can't continue to learn, and I'll jump into an old Honda Civic. I'm terrible at them, and I don't necessarily like them, but I'll drive anything, but you come away from it saying, okay, well, I needed to do 2 or 3 things differently, and then I might figure it out. And just try to figure out what's the best way that I can make this go this fast.
Yeah.
Because it's all different. So the way you get around the course in a Corvette is very different than if you're in a Honda Civic. So or an MR2 or a 911 or they're all unique.
And this is to tease out Sam Strano. He said he'd be on the show. And Shelley Montford. At Spring Nationals, I'm like, I'm going to drive the GT3 for the tour event. They're like, oh, yeah, right here you should lift, and it's going to rotate, and you're going to add gas. It's going to plan itself. I go, that sounds just like a Civic. They go, yes. I go, it's not doing that. But it was too crazy. They said that. I'm like, really? I would never assume that I could drive this, although I don't get my Civic loose all that much. I don't believe. Other people say it's loose and it's moving. To me, it's not crazy loose. But it was too crazy when they said that, whereas when it comes to even S2000s and Corvettes, talking to James Yam helped so much in that. I just assumed they did everything better than the Civic I'm used to. And he was like, no, it's yes, you do different inputs at times, but they're faster in fast sections. And it blows me away that my assumptions were like, this GT3 is faster everywhere. And I would just overdrive it like crazy.
Yeah. It's kind of a perception is reality type of thing, right? I mean, you can get away with certain things in front wheel drive that you can't get away with in rear wheel drive or rear engine or whatever, and that the opposite is true as well. You're not coming out of tight digs that well in a front wheel drive, but a rear engine or a mid engine car is certainly killing you there. But you drive in that regard. So those cars can put their power down easily, and they where the engine is, they rotate a lot earlier. So, you kind of make some runs or whatever and kind of figure that out and go, okay, well, that's the difference is, I'm not just going to go in and wait for the nose. I got to get the car rotated hard early and then get on the gas as soon as possible, because the whole advantage of the car is being able to get on the gas as soon as possible. Yeah. So, you drive to the strengths of the car.
And that's where, how much of that do you think you picked up in the video games? Like with the technology of the wheel and such and the view, I bet you learned a ton of that playing video games.
I'd say so. I mean, I used to hate rear-wheel drive cars for that reason, because it's weird because the way I started was different from how I am now, because I was able to jump into rear-wheel drive, not rear-wheel drive, but all-wheel drive cars, and do really well in them because, well, you can just pretty much point the car and put the throttle down and it takes off and you go in the direction you're pointed. And rear-wheel drive used to always be tough because you had to always catch it and everything, but now it's a little bit different because now I prefer that. Now I think I'm best in rear-wheel drive. I want the car to turn on the throttle. It's all based on throttle for me.
Break that down. It's all based on throttle, and you want it to turn on throttle.
Yeah. So that's pretty much, and this I actually picked up from, it was some video on YouTube or something. It was like Sterling Moss, like driving some old bucket with, no seat belts or whatever the heck they were doing then, and he was like talking into a microphone when he's driving. He says the most important thing is, and what differentiates somebody from somebody else is how early they get on the throttle. And for some reason that always stuck with me, and that's kind of how my driving style has evolved. So, the one thing when I teach Evo schools, when I'm just at a local event and trying to talk people through things, I start with throttle. It's always how early can you get on the throttle, and that's where rear-wheel drive I've sort of learned to embrace, because I can get on the throttle much earlier because the car continues to turn as I give it throttle, or can potentially turn more as I give it throttle. It's like Corvettes, for instance, are really good at that. You can go into a turn and start to lay on the power, and then you feel the nose get light. And then you can even give it more to get it to rotate more, or back off the throttle to get it to rotate less, but you're still accelerating.
And so you're rotating with the rear is slipping a little bit, rotation?
Yes. Basically, if I'm driving a rear-wheel drive car and I'm not coming out of every corner, at least with a little bit of opposite lock, then I'm beating myself up that I didn't get on the throttle early enough. So next time around, I'm trying to get on the throttle a little bit sooner.
That's a great insight, and as I should have watched more of your videos, but that's something I notice on a lot of the fast guys in rear-wheel drive. And riding with Matthew Braun, he would so violently make the car pitch that he'd open the wheel and mash the gas. And same thing Robert Thorne has told me. You're like, oh no, in this big bad wolf, you pretty much have to turn the wheel before you push the gas pedal down.
Yeah. Watch Sam's videos. He is by far one of the best people at kind of not only doing throttle steering, but demonstrating it. And I picked up a lot of that stuff from watching him and talking to him and riding in cars with him and stuff like that. And it's kind of interesting, actually, how similar our driving styles are now.
And something else I think you had mentioned was, you and Tom Reynolds brought this up, is coaching remotely via video. So you might look at Sam's runs and compare them to your runs. Tell us about those thoughts of learning that way.
Yeah, so we do this we certainly do this at nationals, and usually other big events, sometimes even between heats or between runs. We can look at each other's videos, and I think Tom even mentioned this in his interview is, he'll do something one day, and I won't necessarily be at his events because we're on opposite sides of the country, but he'll post up his video and send to me and be like, thoughts? And, send me a quick message, and I'll okay, I'll look and be like, okay, yeah, you should have done this here, or you got to be closer to this cone here, and don't push out as far here, get on the throttle sooner here. And, I'll take screenshots and message them back to him and stuff. So, so that's, we've actually kind of developed a pretty good routine of doing that. Now I just kind of expect it. I go, oh crap, Tom's at an event this weekend, so I better have my notifications on instead of leaving him on mute like most of the time. So, yeah, and we do the same thing at nationals, and I certainly do this with Sam a lot, where I'll go and run the course, and I'll go, it didn't feel that good, or it felt good, but I think there's still some time out there.
So and
you're look at the video.
And you're looking at the video where you can see your hands also, right?
Yes. So I usually put the camera up to the driver's side window, so that way you can see down the side of the car, and I can still see my hands inside the car. So I can see where I'm correcting and where I'm turning in and stuff, but I can still see how close I am to cones on at least that side of the car.
Exactly. That's what I noticed in the video I watched of you, and I just did a coaching video, I guess last week, where I took the four of us in the car, all from the side, and then synced them all up so you could watch all four of us go through the course. Because we really wanted to focus on hand inputs, because Brian Peters at Nationals, he rode with us on the test course, and he was talking about the hands, and you're shocking the car. So it was so key. I was like, oh yeah, in the Civic, I always could see my hands. We're being lazy or thinking, oh, I have to put it in front of the car so we can see the whole course. I would much rather, what you're saying, see my inputs and at least half of the car and maybe 75% of the course.
Yeah, the inputs are so important. I mean, Brian's like 150% right. I mean, I harp on this a lot when I teach schools too, is especially to newer folks, is, when they go in, they're not really sure what to do with their hands, or when people jump from car to car, they pick up certain certain habits. So like shuffle steering, for instance, like everybody who's ever driven an old Honda has picked up the shuffle steering because they have slow steering racks and things like that. So you had to take your hands off the wheel and kind of put a lot of I guess elbow grease into turning those things. So when you jump into, say, a Miata, which has really quick steering, that's usually a recipe for disaster. So so it kind of varies a little bit from car to car, but generally when I'm teaching, I tell people just keep your hands at 9 and 3. And it's kind of interesting the types of feedback that you get, because when people start thinking about what they're actually doing with their hands, they're much less likely to give too much input, which is usually the problem. Too much input, or not be able to catch the car because they're focused so much on just trying to get the car to point X that they're not thinking of how they should be doing that. So, they're not thinking of it as, I need to turn the wheel nice and smooth and try to maintain control of the car. It looks like, they're trying, their hands are all crazy and going all over the place. And it's interesting how much better people's driving can get, or sometimes, especially again when they're newer, people can drop half a second or a second just by saying, okay, pay attention to your hands. I want you to be aware of what you're doing with your hands, and you need to keep them at 9 and 3 and see how it feels. And they're like, they go out and they take a run, and it takes a couple runs to get used to it, but eventually they're saying, hey, you know what, this makes a huge difference, because hey, when the car steps out, my hands are already basically following the wheel to catch it. Whereas if they're trying to turn one-handed or trying to shuffle steer or something like that, they're spending a lot of time penduluming as their hands are frantically trying to catch the wheel. Now, I know there's some people who get away with doing that, and I'll never understand it. And I think that they might still actually be better if they had better hand discipline, but that's always been one of my big things, one of my pet peeves, if you will.
I'm taking it as a personal challenge. At the very least, when I get in a non-Civic or a non-Integra, because I shuffle steer, people ask me, I'm like, I assume I still shuffle steer. I don't even think about it. I've done this long enough, it doesn't even register. It's like left foot braking. That just happens now. But I'm going to, in the S2000s, it's so crazy. Every time I get in it, I have to take my last two fingers off, pinky and the next one, because the first 2 or 3 turns, I will jerk that wheel like it's a Civic that I need to turn a ton, and it's just terrible. But if I would also keep my hands there, that would probably, if I could just focus on that would probably help me also realize, okay, the inputs are not, this is not a Civic.
Right, and it's especially that car. Geez, I mean, it doesn't help that a lot of STRS 2000s I've driven have been pretty horribly set up, whereas they're on a knife edge, and it's even being smooth it's difficult to kind of keep them under you. So trying to really drive anything other than fingers and thumbs makes it way more difficult than it has to be.
Yeah, for me, it's been challenging. I got a public notice for everybody that has S2000s. I drove Jim Rienga's a few months back at a test and tune, and I also rode with him, I guess, like 2 weeks ago. And I was blown away at what he gets away with in that car. I'm like, why isn't your car like every other S2000 I've ever been in? He's like, I don't run a rear bar.
Yep. Oh, man, I'm so glad that somebody else agrees with that, because I've been telling people, especially with like AP1s, I've been telling people that for at least a few years now. Just take the rear bar off.
Yep.
And they say, well, then it'll understeer. I'm like, no, it won't. Take the rear bar off. And then they go out, and then they're a second faster. Like, oh, that was great. I'm like, well, yeah, those cars have what, like a 26 millimeter rear bar or something crazy, and then it has all the crazy toe change. Like those things are a handful. I mean, my thought of it is that you set the car up so that it's drivable. You don't set the car up so that it's 100% all the time, because then you're only actually driving it 100%, maybe 50% of the time. Maybe one out of every 2 times you drive it, you actually make it stick. Even that's probably a little bit optimistic. I say if you can't drive it, set the car up to drive it, to be able to be driven. So, and then people go and do that. They say, okay, well, that's much better. So I think people get carried away a little bit too much sometimes, going, hey, I need this car to rotate, and it's like, oh no, it's got plenty of it already built in. So, but it's rear wheel drive. You need to be able to get the power down, because otherwise you're going to be just wasting your time sliding the car around all the time. So, yeah, take that rear bar off. I helped Ryan Davies with that. I think that was like 3 years ago now. I went to a test and tune in DC and drove his car, and you couldn't carry any speed into any sort of sweeper. The car would just want to swap ends. On throttle, it didn't matter. On throttle, off throttle, on brakes, just coasting, it didn't matter. The car wanted to swap ends no matter what you did. So I told him disconnect the rear bar, so he did, and then the car was literally, I think, 1.5 seconds faster, 2 seconds faster, something stupid like that, because now you could actually use it.
Yeah, you're pointing out something also that always reminds me. People should realize that they buy a car from somebody else, it may not be set up best for them. Like you said, set the car up so it's drivable for you, for your application, for your skill set. Yeah,
and just in general, I mean, and this is another thing that Sam and I talk about is when I was building my STX FRS, I would suggest him, I want to do this or that, and he's like, no, just don't worry too much about it, about wanting it to do X. Just make it drivable. Again, you've got, you go to nationals, you've got 3 runs on a day, on one day. Sometimes you have to deal with weather, changing conditions, things like that. You need to be able to make every single run count. So if you're constantly chasing the car, constantly chasing the setup, or trying to run a setup that's just so knife edge that it's hard to keep under you, it's just, you're throwing away a lot of time and a lot of chance to find time, because you're just trying to catch the car. So, to me, drivability equals speed. So the more dumb-proof the car can be, the faster it can be, in my opinion.
And it's too funny you say that. With the Civic I bought, I don't know, 5 years ago, I got it, and it wasn't loose. I thought, oh, it has to be loose. These fast guys and these ST Civics, they're loose. They're just letting them toss everywhere. I couldn't get the car to be loose. But I started doing really well in it, so I just gave up. I said, it can stay how it is.
Yeah.
I don't care to make it loose, and that's where, because I left foot brake, I realized that keeps it from being as loose, so some people do get in and go, oh, it's loose, whereas other people that drive a lot say, no, it's not. So once it comes back to what are you used to, but also I don't consider my car loose, even though everybody says, oh, a Civic has to be loose to be fast. I don't really think mine is, and yet it's been very competitive.
Well, you have to really. The answer is you have to drive it well to be fast. I mean, that's the real that's the real answer to that question. Because I mean, you can see you can see people who have CRXs or Civics or whatever they spin 2 runs and then they finally get one in and it's decent or it could be really good. But if you've got 3 runs and you've got weather incoming and you've got 1 run to make it count, do you make it? It's much harder to pull that off. So
yeah,
and then
the odds are not so good.
Right, the odds are against you. And going back to your point about driving style, that plays a huge part in it too. So if you're somebody who trail brakes a lot, you're going to generally want a car that's probably a little bit pushier on entry. So that way it stays together a little bit better going into the corner. And like me, I focus on early throttle as much as possible. So I generally, my cars are probably a little bit on the pushy side. But I want them.
That's interesting you say that. Matthew Braun, he made me drive his car at Spring Nats. And he goes, oh, you're trying to drive the nose or something. He goes, I set mine up to drive pushy so I can be on the gas. And what you're saying is so true about being on the gas. When we look at all the data from these different cars, he who's on a good line with you or whoever's on the gas first is going to win. And that's what we found over and over. Have you done much with data?
Well, I have kind of a complicated relationship with data. So I started using Solo Storm when it first came out. So I was like an early adopter, but I wasn't all that happy with it. So I used it a few times and kind of discovered that I wasn't really getting a lot out of it. There was a lot of GPS drift issues and it was kind of difficult to overlay across other people's stuff. So now they have like cloud sharing and things like that. But, back in the early versions, you could pretty much have to kind of put your tablet next to somebody else's and then like, did you start yet? No. Oh yeah. Okay. Sorry. Wasn't paying attention. So, it was kind of difficult to do that type of stuff. So I stopped using it for a little while. I started using it again this year. At the request of my girlfriend Maria, since I've been, kind of coaching her in the past year, and she'd been begging me to take Solo Storm and the whole setup out to a local. So I said, okay, whatever. It was the weekend or maybe 2 weekends before Nationals, and took the data, and I was amazed at how much better it is now and what I was able to take away from it. And it ended up helping me a lot at Nationals. So some of the things I was picking up was, one thing is little mistakes you can catch on data in a way that makes you think they're not such little mistakes. So by that, I mean, if you're half a second behind somebody, for instance, somebody else in your class or somebody else you're competing with on packs, sometimes those differences are very, very minute. So just because I was 2 miles an hour slower in this corner, that translated to 2 miles an hour less entry speed into the next straightaway. So it turns into this whole thing where, this one little tiny mistake that if you're just kind of playing it back in your head or looking at the video doesn't stick out as being like, oh, I definitely screwed that up, but you did. I mean, the data shows it. The data shows that you lost half a second by making that mistake. So I figured out stuff like that from the data, and also things like I figured out the focus I was running this year was heat soaking at this event because it was like 98 or 99 degrees. And we were basically hot lapping the car. And what I was finding out was when I would get onto the straightaway, because there was like a 78 mile an hour slalom section, third gear in the car, is I was getting on the throttle sooner. So I was full throttle sooner, but my actual top speed was lower by the end of the same section. And I couldn't ever get it higher. So the highest speed I had done in that section was 78 miles an hour. So by the afternoon, I was like stonewalled at 76, despite getting on the throttle sooner. So I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. And there wasn't really any noticeable line change. And then it kind of hit me. I'm like, oh crap, I think the car is actually heat soaking. It's just not making as much power as it was when it was 65 or 70 degrees in the morning. So, so I started spraying the intercooler off and spraying the radiator, and what do you know, the speed came back. So those kinds of things I think were really helpful, and it really helped my girlfriend as well, because she ended up winning G Street Ladies this year, and it was nice to help to help her with that, because we could sit in the car and say, okay, here's the difference between our runs, or even the difference between her own runs. So, between run 1 and run 2, what did you do better? What did you do worse? And you can pick those things out and say, okay, well, on the data, it's showing that you need to do this, this, and this. So go ahead and just worry about maybe fixing one of those things and go from there. And then you should be right in the game. And that ended up working out for her for sure, and for me as well.
Yeah, it's huge what you can find from that. And I'm just letting people know how embarrassed I am to have to admit that at Nationals, we looked at the data from runs 1 to 2 and didn't realize I lost 0.6 of a second on the East course in that tight little pinch turn, and then 0.7 because I overcooked it. But I didn't even notice that. Like, I've not been using Solostrom that long. We borrowed it several times this year. But you can break down sections. Some people didn't realize, the people that started with Solostorm originally, you can turn on sections and it will auto put sections on there.
Yeah.
I came from the TrackMate world, and I don't know if the TrackMate, it's up to par with TrackMate yet, except that it is beyond, because you can look at it right away. But I found out so quickly from the TrackMate that, wow, you could not only lose half a second in a section, you could also transfer that time to a previous or next section.
Yeah, so you can kind of figure out like theoretical performance and things like that. I had the same issue at Nationals, because when G Street was running, it was impending rain, and I ended up getting like the last dry run, because I had my wipers going when I was coming through the finish. But when I was sitting there waiting for the second run, and I'm like, oh god, I hope it doesn't rain on me, I was looking at the data, and I'm like, okay, there's not really any obvious mistakes, so whatever. And then I go out on the second run, and I screwed up that pinch turn too. I blew it hard. I blew it so badly, and I didn't post the video, but you can hear me swear from inside the car as I'm coming out of that corner, because I knew I biffed it so badly. And when I looked at the data afterwards, I lost 0.7 of a second in that whole section just from that one mistake. And that run was actually faster than run 1. So there was still another 0.7 out there at least from just that one little tiny mistake. So
yeah, because that's the classic kind of road course, like slow in, fast out. It so pinched you if you had to wait on that turn or wait on that outside cone, and that was just like a straight. As much of a straight as we ever see.
Yeah, and that cone snuck up on you too, because I was, or at least it felt like I was going faster into that pinch, so I slowed down and then turned in earlier, because I was kind of off the cone a little bit on the first run, and then got on the throttle sooner, and then all of a sudden that cone was right on top of me, so I had to come out of the throttle and then get back in so I wouldn't run it over. Because there was no option for another dry run, so I couldn't afford to hit that cone. So it was hit the cone or have the time. So I went with the time instead of hitting the cone. So
you benefited 1.3 seconds or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I even recreated that turn except to the left at a local course after that, and overdrove it 4 or 5 times out of 6 or something. And luckily, this comes back to what James Young said. I got John Ames in the car the last run. I said, so what did I do there? Did I not keep enough weight on the nose? He goes, you just overdid it.
Yeah.
And that comes to, I'm just blown away at my assumptions of this GT3 can do these things better. Not necessarily. That little Civic actually does do some things really good. Probably little turns like that. It weighs 1,900 pounds. It can get around those.
Yeah, the direction change is much more immediate, and dimensionally as well. I mean, a Civic compared to a 911, especially in that section of that course is, I'm pretty sure almost every single one of the STS guys were, I'm sure you had to have been pretty much flat through that section. whereas the car is small enough that the tiny little openings at the end of each section were, it's just whatever, I got this. The having 12 inches less width is definitely an advantage for sure.
Yeah, it's huge, and it's something that I guess I'm telling some people and myself, just don't assume that because somebody else did it in their car that way, you can do that, or don't.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping, honestly.
Especially if it's not the same car.
Yeah, the video games, I'm really hoping that I'll learn, like, every time I get in here, I've just got to pay attention to what the car can do, not what I'm going to guess the car can do, because I've definitely assumed for most of this year, this GT3 is magical. It's a supercar. It does everything better. So data is now back on your list, it sounds like, of something you'll be doing. Maria's probably very happy and going to push for that.
Yeah, I gotta get a tablet mount now for the ND. So, but yeah, I was amazed at how much it's improved even just in a couple of years, and it's been super helpful this year, and we'll definitely be using it more next year.
Yeah. So you said you get bored with cars often.
Yes.
What? So I'm the opposite. I don't want to ever get rid of them, and when I have, I'm like,
already. I already have a pretty good idea what I'm going to buy next. I think I'm already bored of that, so I don't even have it yet, and I think I'm already bored.
I think it's a video game thing. I just figured it out. Those of you that play video games, you could hop in every cool car and you learn them, and next.
Yeah, it's instant gratification, right? Like, I can just jump out of one thing and go do this. Okay, well, how about I just do that in real life, too? Maybe not the smartest financial decision, but okay, this is fun.
I'm on the other spectrum, though. It's not good either to keep all these cars and they're not racing. They're not doing much. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah, well, you have a Type R, so you kind of have an investment.
Yeah, no, true. I've told myself that. Told myself that with the yellow one, and then it got cut into little pieces. Like, oh, no. That's the thing. Oh, that's where the GT4. I cannot believe I even looked at. It's all Salil's fault. I'm blaming you. I was like, oh, those will go up in value. Oh, if I sold some things, yeah, it's an investment. Luckily, I did not pull that off, but
yeah.
So let's go to setup. Are you a setup guy?
I thought I was. And so I used to think I was a setup guy. So I used to be all about like buying the expensive shocks and playing with the car every run and throwing all kinds of money and parts at the car. I am not that anymore because I realize I'm not very good at it. I realized that kind of a lot of things that I thought would happen, that just never seems to always work out the same way twice. So now I pretty much outsource all of my setup questions to Sam. So he has never led me wrong in terms of setup. So I tell him what the car is doing. He says, go turn this knob or do this and that. And I go, oh yeah, that is a lot better. And then, I don't worry about it, I guess. So I try not to think about it too much and just kind of keep it simple.
Do you find yourself adjusting much at an autocross during a typical day or any day?
What do you mean?
Are you going to turn knobs?
Are
you going to tweak anything? Yeah.
No, I don't even. I try not to touch the car at all. Actually, I mean, part of it's me because I figure if I'm not doing well, it's my fault. So I'm not driving well. I'm doing this. I'm usually looking at driving. So I guess this is why the data has been more appealing to me as of late, because I'm looking at, I need to drive this better. I need to drive this better. I need to drive this better. Well, the car isn't doing this, and then I'm going, well, I don't care. I'm going to drive this better. Now that that has kind of its pros and cons. Like I said, there's times where I think if I do a certain thing that will make the car better in some way, and it doesn't. And then, so I think, okay, well, why did I just waste my time doing it? So then I'm flustered because I'm dumb and can't figure out how to set up a car, and then I do worse. So, like I said, I keep it simple and try not to overthink it, and mostly try to focus on the driving as opposed to the setup. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah, I just admit I don't know what to do, so I don't mess with the setup.
Yeah.
And you didn't get to hear the Tom O'Gorman interview yet. He said he's found that the setup is not so important until you get to cars like the FP cars. He goes, he's found when he hops in those that, yes, he'd like to blame himself, but he's found that those more things closer and closer to real race cars or race-only cars, that's where setup and changing things seems to have a much bigger bang for the buck, and actually he doesn't have to blame himself. Not blame himself as much. You get more bang for the buck or return by knowing how to set up or by knowing how to tweak those things.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I mean, I think people try to split hairs a lot, and I think it's less of an issue at that level, like with prep or mod cars. I mean, I'm still kind of the camp that you don't necessarily need $5,000 shocks for a street class car because you're kind of, I feel like you're kind of wasting your time. Now, people have proven me wrong, but I mean, you look at C Street. I think the McKelvey's car, the winning car, was on MCSs, and I know the Garfields were on just off-the-shelf Conies, and he was half a tenth off. So, with changing conditions and stuff, how much of that comes down to the shocks? I don't know, but it's close enough for me. So, I'll buy the $800 shocks and continue to suck at turning just one knob instead of having to deal with two. So, but like I said, I used to be the opposite way. So I had the first STU Evo. God, actually both STU Evos were a nightmare, but the first one, I had Öhlins on it first, and then I bought used Motons off of somebody that I don't remember. Then I sold those to buy new Moton motorsport shocks. Because this is me thinking that I know all about this setup, and if I spend all this money, the car will be fast. And then the car ended up going slower, relatively speaking, on the motorsport shocks, and one broke, so the car was sidelined.
And then you won in the car with singles, right?
Yes, so we went full circle back to a car with Öhlins, single adjustable Öhlins, and then that was the car that I ended up winning in. So again, it just kind of didn't just shoot myself in the foot, but pretty much completely blew my own leg off. So yeah. Yeah,
you paid attention to the experiment of, hey, I just got in this other car and we didn't need those shocks.
Yeah. So again, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it's never been. It was something that I tried and it didn't work. So I'm saying, you know what, screw it. I'll just ask Sam. That's a lot less headache.
No, and that's why I keep hearing over and over from people. That's why I think you and so many people have Strano parts on your car. You appreciate what he does. And
Sam has been nothing but good to me, and I have nothing but good things to say about him. He can be a little controversial at times. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, but
hey, if he keeps telling you how to go faster, let it be controversial.
Yeah, and Sam's been a great friend to me ever since I started. So, nothing but the best for him. So,
yeah, all the setup stuff. I'm reminded. I read a sports car many years ago, maybe 10 years ago now, and they put a coilover package or springs and shocks on maybe a Subaru, and took 7/10 off. And from that point, I realized, okay, once you get something in the ballpark, what are you really, maybe you said splitting hairs. Once you're in the ballpark, especially in these Civics, I feel like you get in the ballpark in a Civic. Yet I've done the same thing. I went off and bought the Pro Part shocks. I'm like, no, I want it. And for me, although I haven't finished yet, so Jeff and Nicole can beat me over my head when I interview them, I haven't been turning the knobs. But I was like, that's the point. That's why I got these, because I keep telling myself I want to figure out and feel a difference and learn some things. I may just honestly give up, but I've always thought, no, I want to learn this and see if I can feel a difference or notice something different at probably a test and tune day or something.
Yeah, I go back and forth with that too, because I go, well, I thought I knew about setup, but I don't, so maybe I should probably learn and try turning some knobs, and then I don't do that, or I do it and don't necessarily get the results I want, but yeah.
The answer, ask Sam.
Yeah, the answer is ask Sam or ask whoever built your shocks.
Yeah. That's where David White.
I think I've asked Jeff some questions too, because I bought some Pro Part shocks for the RX-8. But
exactly. So you got Jeff Long, you got David Whitener, you got Sam Strano. There's even other people. But if you're driving a car that they've driven well, talk to them. Most of them can sell you something even and tell you exactly what they've done and what works for them.
Yeah, exactly. Especially since there's so many people that I think are pretty open to sharing that kind of information. That it's not really that hard to get. I mean, I don't think I don't think the sport really breeds too many people who are, really trying to be secretive about what they're doing, or won't show you the underside of their car or whatever. So, yeah, it's not too difficult to find people who know what they're doing. You just gotta, I guess, not be afraid to ask them.
Yeah, and think a lot of these people, they can sell you something, so they can give you knowledge and then sell you the part. The knowledge part is priceless. You should pay extra for the parts because of the knowledge. I mean, the time I've seen David Whitener and Jeff Wong, the amount of time they put in revalving, changing setups, trying these things, it's incredible because it's so the opposite of me. I'm like, in reality, I should just pay you guys, please set up my car, or let me buy a car from you, because you're far, far beyond what I can even conceive of doing. Yeah,
I know. It's like it'd be nice to be able to just say, to go to one of those guys and say, here's money, make me fast. And then that's never really the whole story, right? I mean, we go back to driving styles. So, the way that, Jeff drives, for instance, or Sam drives, they're really good at setup. But you look at one of Jeff's cars, like his CRX or his Civic, or I think he's working on an ND now. You look at that and you go, hey, I'm going to give you my credit card number and you send me all the parts you have. And they go, okay. And then you send it, and then you put all the stuff on your car and you go, this sucks. I didn't go and I didn't win packs, so what's wrong? And then that's usually either one or maybe one of two or maybe both things, which is, A, you either are not driving it correctly, or it's just not set up for your style.
Yeah, and what I realize is they're constantly tweaking things. So, and that's where it sounds like with Sam, you would say, hey, the car feels like this, or Tom to you, the car's doing this, or here, look at this video, and you guys can give feedback, and then you might tweak something else. Because also, something I got to point out that was a hard lesson for me, 2 Pro Solos in a row in a Type R Integra D-Stock, thinking they're all the same. If you don't have the same exact alignment, forget everything else.
Yeah.
Like, when I was driving the car without tow out and didn't realize I didn't have tow out, I was like, I can't get this car to work. Once again, assuming, hey, it's set up just like mine. No, it was not.
Well, and since you're bringing up alignments, I mean, that's so important. Like, to me, that is probably the most important part of getting the setup right. Not the shocks or, your $5,000 shocks or, crazy sway bars or whatever, but just that stuff that's kind of already inherently built into the car, because your shocks or your sway bars or your springs or whatever are all pretty much designed to either preserve or change how the alignment changes as the car goes through motion. So I'm super picky about alignments for that reason. And I've experienced those same situations where it's like, man, this car is just undrivable, or this car's terrible. We had that issue with our ND. We ran it once before all the transmission stuff came up, and we parked it. I ran it at a local, and the car was just a dumpster fire. And then I got it realigned 2 days ago, and the front camber was down by half a degree, so it was like 1.3 on one side and 0.8 on the other. And then the toe was like every wheel was pointing a different direction, so it was, and opposite corners were towed in and out. So I think like the driver rear and the passenger front were towed out, and then the driver front and passenger rear were towed in. So it was almost like a crab walk type of thing. But I was like, well, okay, well, that explains why the car was so abhorrent to drive. I guess I'll find out tomorrow if the new alignment made any difference, but I guess I'm expecting it to.
Oh, and that's something I didn't get for years. Now, did you have this aligned before also?
Yeah, so we just kind of eyeballed, well, I don't want to say eyeballed, but we put it on a rack. But it was a real quick, like, okay, this will be fine. And it wasn't. So I wasn't I wasn't with the car when it was aligned the first time, so I can't really say that it was perfect. So, but now that I was the one who had it aligned, it was much better the second time.
Yeah. When the Whiteners pointed out that this is how important alignment is, they checked their alignment either before or no, actually at Nationals. So if you traded the car out there or drove it out there, check your alignment. Then if there's a group of you that know each other or care to help each other get faster, the car that wins, go and check the alignment after it wins.
Right.
I was like, my goodness.
That's kind of crazy. I haven't thought about doing that, but that's kind of a good idea. And I know that I think if you're handy with tools, I'm not one of those people, but get your own alignment equipment. You don't necessarily need a rack, but the smart strings are really good, and you can get all the equipment for like $700 or $800, but you can split it amongst people in your region. So if you've got 3 or 4 good buddies that also run in your region, hey, well, you guys can, if you guys are handy enough and know what to do, you guys can kind of all share alignment equipment, and that kind of eases the sting of having to pay $100 for an alignment every time you want to change it. Or if you get to the point where you're really checking your alignments a lot, that you have those tools available and you're skilled and proficient at using them.
Yeah, and I've got to give a shout out for 3R Racing. I've used them several times. At one point, this is so sad to say, I showed up to the Pro Solo we had in Colorado. Andy Hollis comes up in his Civic, and I'm just terrible. I'm like, oh my goodness, this ST class is tough. I had an 1.25 inch toe in the front of the car.
Yeah, I found out. I found out something similar with the Focus earlier this year. It was the same. I don't know if it must have slipped, but it was. Yeah, I was wondering why it was going through tires so badly, and part of the reason was I think I had probably about that much, 1.5 to 1 3/4 out on one side, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, and that's where simple. So those of you that don't realize, you can just have toe plates. I don't know what I paid for those aluminum ones, if they're $20 or $50. You can check that. Usually you can even see that. So let me admit that I didn't even notice or even notice that the car was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, for 3R Racing, one time I replaced the rear control arms, did all kinds of work. And this is where they had to manually spend time rolling the car off the rack and back on the rack. I paid well over $500 for alignment. It was the best thing I ever did, spending money on the car.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's always the first thing I do with any car, especially if you're buying a newer car for like street class. Do not trust the alignment that comes on that thing from the factory, because the guy making $20 an hour sitting on the line putting 1,000 Miatas together a day does not care how that thing is aligned. I mean, they're going to line up the bolts, whatever marks are in the bolts, and impact those babies in, and then you're off to the races. So I think that they're pretty bad as is from the factory.
Yeah.
I know the Focus RS is pretty bad. A buddy of mine who bought one, it had I think an 1/8, maybe an 1/8 on each side, maybe an 1/8 inch in on each side, I think, in the rear. It's just terrible.
Of all things, I heard Larry King live being on a podcast, and he brings up that you want to buy cars that are made on, they say, Tuesday or Wednesdays. He goes, Fridays they're leaving early, and Mondays they're not happy being at work. So realize the guy that did your alignment may not have been happy when he was there. It might have been the bad time of the week for him, or a bad week in general.
Right, he's like, I'm going to show them. I'm going to put all these camber bolts in backwards.
All right, I'll tell you, everybody else, if you have a stock S2000, and I'm talking from AP1 land, do not autocross it without an alignment. I did that 2 or 3 times, and drifting is just not that much fun for me when it's not a drift contest, because autocrossing sucks when you're sideways the whole time. I mean, I guess it's practice for something, but I don't know what.
Yeah, or backwards. That's usually how I end up in AP1s. I usually end up going through everything backwards.
I did that, and fellas like begging for rides. I forget why I didn't have a Civic or something at that point, but I'm like, can I please drive the STR car, because this sucks. Why did I bring this out again? Now, great point about the smart strings. You might also find that some people around you have them, and you might try them before you buy them, or you might go in with them and toss them some money even for their time to do that. I've heard good things about those.
Yeah, that's one of those things that, no, I don't use them that much. I know Tom Reynolds has a set that he shares with some of his local people, and before I moved away from Ohio, I was going to try to get some of those guys in to do the same thing. But if I had the option to right now, I definitely do that.
Yeah, because if nothing else, it sounds like probably decently quickly you could at least check your alignment.
Yeah, for sure.
That's huge. You talked about 3 runs and that, hey, you can't be playing around too much. You don't want a car that you're chasing. What is the mental side for you for a 3-run format, national style?
Well, I have a pretty specific, I guess, strategy, which is, it changes run to run. So run 1 is I pretty much want to go out and just throw caution to the wind. So there's nothing to lose or win on run 1. So go out and kind of put down the fastest run I can, and so that has 2 effects. So 1, I can either figure out what the car actually has in it, and secondarily, if the run is good, then it can potentially mentally bury my competitors. So, if you go out and throw out a good run 1, then you go, oh wow, that was a great run, and hey, that was that's the top time in the class, and that was half a second faster than the next guy, and then everybody's going to be looking at it and going, oh crap, okay, well now what do I do? So it's going to put everybody else in a panic mode. So that's why I think it's important to get the first, get the first shot, I guess. And then run 2 is dependent on how run 1 went. So if run 1 ended up being coned, then it's kind of a safety run. So it's an 8/10 run. So, okay, well, I coned, so I'm going to try to salvage this and try to put something in and maybe take a few chances, but nothing too crazy. And if that sticks, then great. Then back to, okay, maximum attack on the last run. Let's take everything we learned from run 1 and run 2, try to put it all together, blah blah blah. So I generally try to follow that kind of strategy. There has been times where I've deviated, and one of those times was actually Spring Nationals, I think 2014. So I was running SSR with James Newman, and I think I was back a little bit on day 1. And day 2 had a really nasty section in the back that was really tight, and it was tough to get through there in a Corvette, at kind of maximum speed. And the first run I went out there and I coned in that section, and the time was decent, but I'm like, I coned. So second run I went out, tried to do the same thing. Okay, I'm going to try to not cone, and coned again. So now I was kind of in trouble, because I was thinking, okay, well, I try to back it off and I still hit a cone, and I'm like, well, maybe I still got to slow down a little bit more there or something. And I was racking my brain. And I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting in the car, and Matthew Braun comes over and Sam comes over, and Matthew had said something to me that has kind of stuck with me since then, which is, there are times where, especially if you're running a class like SSR, where there's no time to leave anything out on the table. So, SSR is one of those classes. SSR, STR, I think, is one of those classes. STX, a lot of these big, really competitive classes is, sometimes you don't really have room for a safety run or, something to give yourself something to salvage. And he's like, you have to take every run like it's the last run you'll ever take in that car. So that's what I did, is I went out and I'm like, I'm just going to try to hit all my marks. I'm going to go as fast as possible, because here's the thing. I would have rather gone home being 8th with a cone, but had the raw time, than be 3rd or something like that, 3rd or 4th, and not have a cone, but know that I still left time out there. Like, I couldn't live with the fact that if I went and phoned it in, that I just left the time out there and didn't really go for it. So I went for it and stuck the run. And I was second by like half a tenth, but it was the fastest time that day. And that was probably, I think, one of the best runs I've ever done in autocross ever. Unfortunately, I don't have it on video anywhere, but it was kind of a interesting conversation with Matthew and Sam at that time, and how sometimes that strategy has to change.
And that's where you mentioned in the article you're hard on yourself. In that case, It sounds like you were rather happy, though, that they talked to you, you can give them some credit, and that you went for it and you stuck it. And that's probably something, like you said, you kept. It's part of you now. You're not going to sit there and say, okay, I'm just going to go clean and then see that I'm 5th spot or something.
That would be, that would bother me. I mean, it still bothers me to this day. If going and being like, there's those events where it's like, I really could have, I looked at the video and I'm like, there was this and this and so I still fall into that mentality sometimes, and sometimes I forget about that lesson, which is is easy to do sometimes depending on the type of pressure you're seeing. So, but yeah, it's definitely a big part of the game. Probably 50% of it, I'd say.
What, the mental side?
Yeah, just autocross in general. 50% of it's mental, for sure.
That's what I've always said. Once you get to a certain point, that just says I'm mentally not prepared, I guess. But if you're decently paxing out well or you're competitive, I think the mental part is the last. Can you get to that section? Can you get yourself in the right mental aspect to be your best for your 3 runs? That's why I love hearing from you guys. What are your thoughts on this? What do you do? What's your routine? Do you look at much video in between runs? Is that part of your routine?
Yeah. So definitely, since I started hanging out with Sam a lot more, is I was definitely looking at video between runs. Like that would be the first thing I'd go to. Now I've kind of been looking at data, and then maybe I'll look at the video depending on, because sometimes you need the video to kind of validate the data. So, just because you went through this certain section faster doesn't necessarily mean it looked that way. The West Course this year was a really good example of that. There were sections that I could have sworn I was taking pretty well, and then I looked at other people's videos and thought, there's no way you're getting this right. And then they're much faster doing it where it looks wrong. I guess so to speak, on video. So they kind of work to each other's benefits.
Yeah, true. To double check, like, I was off the cones there, so maybe I was too wide in the sweeper versus too tighter.
Yeah, but so again, West Course this year, that you went through that first section and then you came into that pinch, that little 2-cone pinch. My thought was, you're kind of cutting your distance down there, but you're setting it up just wide enough that you're not fighting the car coming out. So I did that, and it was okay. But then I looked at the data of another run, I think the last run I did, where I tried to take it tighter, and it felt terrible, and it was faster. It was faster in that section. So, just looking at it, well, I guess experiencing it for one thing, and then looking at it on video, it's like, okay, it felt like crap when I was in the car. It looks like crap on the video, and then I look at the data, and it's like, it's 2/10 faster in that section. And then I'm sitting there scratching my head like, okay, well, at least that's, at least I learned something from that.
And what you just said is what I swear the data. The tighter line pretty much always is going to be faster if you're at the limit. So, it may feel terrible, like, I really had to fight to get through that. But if you can look at how much distance you save, which TrackMate's so good at that, it was amazing how, especially courses like that where it's big, huge sweepers, you could cut so much distance just by being tight.
Yeah, and I try to focus on that too, which is it still kind of eludes me a little bit, is trying to figure out how much distance to cut. I guess I try to follow the mentality of when in doubt, just cut distance. I think maybe on one of your previous podcasts, I think you said John Ames said pretty much exactly the same thing.
Bob Tennell would always say, and he'll say this in every walking course, he goes, if I'm here and there's room between me and that cone, I know John Ames is going to be right there.
Right. Right, something like that. So it was so that I that's how I kind of think of it too. Is when in doubt, cut distance, and then but then there's still times where it's kind of like, well, I could if I set this up a little bit, and then whatever. But yeah.
Have you road course raced much?
No, I've done a couple. I've done well, maybe a few track days. I've done a few track days with my 240SX. I did a Mid Ohio school. So it was actually interesting how I got into that, because the Mid Ohio school would have a open house. This was, man, I can't remember what year this was. But when they would do the open house, they'd have an autocross. So at the autocross, they had a competition where whoever had the fastest time would get a free entry into the school. Well, I went and got the fastest time, so I got free entry into the school. So that was pretty cool. So I got to go do the first level of the Mid-Ohio school in one of their cars for no cost to me. And then they do the same thing at the school where they have an autocross, and you do the autocross at the beginning, and then you do it at the end. And then the end is kind of, you kind of figure out what you learned, and it should theoretically improve your time and all that stuff. So, then the second autocross was another competition, so I was able to win that one too. So I got the second level of school for free by winning that. But I think that was probably the last time that I was able to do any track stuff. I've never been a big HPD guy. I did it when I had my 240SX because I just wanted to go out and just have fun with the car, but it's never really appealed to me because it doesn't have that competitive aspect. You can run a timer or whatever. I can brag about how I passed some guy who doesn't know what he's doing in a McLaren or something, but that doesn't really mean anything at the end of the day. So, and then going to like the club racing level or something like that doesn't really interest me that much.
Rats. So I'm sorry for all the competitors that have to compete with him. He's not going away. Andrew's here to stay. Yeah, that's where I've done a little bit. And it was interesting hearing from Tom O'Gorman how he said the lines are so much different that he has to like reprogram himself for the track. And you said from video games, he just took wide swoopy lines. And that when somebody rode with him and said cut down distance, I don't know if it took off 2 seconds or whatever, or 4 seconds. So that's where, if you are doing the video games, I'm now telling myself from hearing that from him, I'm going to take the lines that are wider there, but in autocross land, definitely cut those down. And I'm convinced that so many people can be faster and probably be decently fast compared to everybody in your region if you will cut distance. When I'm walking courses and people are walking wide, I'm just like,
yeah, that drives me crazy. I yell at people at local region events because I'll be walking with them, and if it's somebody I know or something, I'll be like, well, why are you out there? And then make them explain it to me why they'd be out there, and then go, well, I'm going to set this up better. I'm like, well, what? Well, I'll go watch this, and then I've done this before where I'll have people come back with me. I'll be like, okay, we're going to walk at the same speed. You go the way you're going to go. I'll walk the way I'm going to go, and I'll bet you I'll be 5 or 10 feet in front of you by the time we actually get there. And we do, and it does. And they go, oh, okay, I guess you're right. So, that you can even make that example walking the course is, hey, if you're trying to go way, way wide in these sweepers and things like that, well, I'll just walk inside, and then I'll pass you when we're walking the course, and that should be kind of a red flag, I would think.
Exactly. I even brought a wheel out. I think we should have 2 wheels or 3 wheels or 4 wheels at every local area, so you can get your little wheel counter and go, okay, walk over there. It's huge, and that's what the track mate would show. People would look. I'd share my data. They'd be like, wow, you did 30 feet less on that course.
Yeah,
okay.
And it's amazing how much that matters, because if you tell somebody that, they go, okay, 30 feet, big deal. But 30 feet, when you really measure it out, look at it on the course, and then you look at it on the clock, it's significant.
Exactly. Just take an average of 35 or 40 miles an hour at 30 feet. You'll find national championships lost by that easily.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Course walks. What's your, you walking 2 times, 5 times, 10 times?
A bazillion times if I have the opportunity to. So, usually at nationals, I try to get as many walks in as I can. So I know that there's some different sort of schools of thinking on this. I find that I think of course walks as they're free runs. So you can walk as many or as little times as possible, and you're on course, and you're not driving the car, but you're theoretically in a position where the car should be. Now, I feel like you can never learn enough from course walks. So, and this has happened to me on a few occasions where, particularly at nationals, where I'll go and walk the course 2 or 3 times, like maybe the night before I run, or the day before I run, and then I go, okay, I got the course memorized, everything. I know where I have to go and where the car should be, and blah. But then I go out maybe the morning of, and I see something that I didn't see before. So I think I look at something and go, oh well, I kind of missed this, but this tile, this concrete block has a different grain than the other one, so maybe the grip's going to be a little bit different here, or something like that. Some sort of detail that I might have missed before, that I catch on to at the 4th or 5th run. Sometimes it's just, okay, I did all these walks, and now I get some time away from the course and go and get drunk and pass out, and then wake up in the morning and then walk the course again, and it's and something else has changed. So I generally say walk as many times as possible, but just don't overthink it.
And do you dare walk both courses before you run one course?
No, absolutely not. I don't even think about the other course until I'm done with the first one.
So once you're done, you probably get over there and start walking right away to get, let's say, 10 walks in or something. Yeah,
I mean, it's generally, depending on how I do the first day, determines how much I'm going to care about doing course walks the second day. But yeah, generally I'll go and walk. I can usually get 3 walks in. I've done walks basically almost in the dark before, and then try to get at least 3 in before, and then maybe 2 in the morning. Sometimes 3 in the morning.
Okay. So you're not getting 20 walks in. You're getting a good amount in.
No. I'm just embellishing that for the radio, as they say. Yeah, realistically it's probably 5 to 6 if I want to do a lot of walks.
Okay. And one course at a time, whereas some people, they go and see both of them so they can get that extra walking in. Locally, do you walk that much, or do you ever not walk or only walk once?
I do about 3. Here's one thing that I've kind of been thinking of doing next year, though, is trying to do local events without doing any walks, and see how that kind of turns out and what I sort of pick up from that, which is, okay, not doing any walks, I've got 3 or 4 runs to make it count. So I just need to kind of want to know where the course goes, and then just try to figure it out on looking ahead and eyes alone, and just see how that works out. And maybe my answer will change about how much I think I should walk. But yeah, generally I'll again, like I said, I'll try to get as many walks in as I can. So for locals, that might be 3.
Yeah, and that's an experiment. I'm trying to do the opposite. I really want to walk it more and still see if I can drive as well. Okay. And for me, it all means, will I still look ahead? Will I not just assume I know where the heck I'm going and then pinch something because I wasn't looking ahead? So that's something for everybody to think about. What little experiments can you try, from cutting distance, taking the data, looking at, to walking the course? Is it true that at Evo schools, sometimes you change the course and don't let them walk it?
That's absolutely what happens. So I don't want to give too much away because I don't know how Junior feels about that. But yeah, on as part of Phase 2, there are portions where the course will change, and you were just told where the change happened. You have to figure out by looking ahead, And you have to look ahead pretty far because the element that changes requires you to, you can't look out the windshield of your car. So I don't know if have you done a phase 2 at all?
No, I have not. I keep wanting to do them. He's like, you don't need to. I'm like, I think I'm just going to pay the money and be like, I paid. I have to do them.
Yes. Yeah. No. There's nobody who is too experienced for it. I had to instruct GH Sharp earlier this year, so there's nobody who is too experienced or is to the point where they can't learn anything. But as part of phase 2, the end of the course, because it's basically a go down and come back, is you have to look out the side of the car. You can't rely on just looking forward out the windshield because there's nothing to guide you to the other side of the course. So, the element that changes is right in that area where you really have to turn your head and you really have to almost look over your shoulder to try to catch the element and be able to figure out how it's changed.
Yeah, like what side of the cone, let's say, I have to be on. And that's just, to me, that's so important. It's an assumption I make, once again, especially after hearing James John say, I don't really look ahead. That's the thing I don't do the best. So thus he walks the courses a lot. I kind of feel like I have a better chance if we wouldn't let anybody walk the course. Then I think I would stand out.
Yeah, well, you know what? I agree with James because I feel like I'm the same way too. I feel like I don't look ahead enough, and maybe that's my thought too. Because even I picked up stuff from phase 2 from instructing it, which is okay. Maybe, it's kind of like okay, this is how it works from the instructing side. So it kind of made me kind of look at it a little bit differently. But I've always felt that I have the same problem, which is I kind of rely a little bit too much on my periphery and what's in front of me, and I kind of memorize sections instead of really looking at them.
Do you ever memorize braking points?
Yes, and I don't think that's the right answer to the question.
It's cost me, unless it's a really tight section and I'm in an Integra or an S2000, I want to downshift. So for me, that's the only time I allow myself anymore to say brake here, unless I blow it on run 1 or 2 and then I say, hey, pay attention there.
Yeah, I make a guess. I make a guess when I do a walk. So I think, I'm going to brake here, and then I'm going to brake hard. I guess it's not so much the points, but I'm going to say I'm going to brake here, or I'm going to brake here and hard in kind of a general area, or I'm going to brake here and not that much. And then, maybe sometimes 50% of that stuff goes out the window when I actually get in the car.
Yeah, because you are at least looking ahead enough to see. What else do you get out of coaching? Like, how much did that help you, do you think, and count for seat time?
Well, I guess it helps me in the sense that I get to jump in a lot of different people's cars. And like I said, I have no there are no limits to the how crappy the car can be or how good the car can be. I'll drive it. I don't care. So I get that experience out of it, and I get the satisfaction of being able to actually help people become better. So before basically a couple of years ago when I started doing this, I didn't really do a lot of instructing. I didn't think I was any good at it. I think I always thought I could jump in and do something, but I could never really explain how I did it. Well, over time, especially hanging around people like Sam, who's really, really, really good at being able to explain things in ways people can understand, I've sort of been able to pick that up and be able to pass that on to other people. So kind of seeing the effects of that has been at least fulfilling for me, to be able to sit in a car with somebody and say, oh yeah, you need to do this and this, or be able to pick out 2 or 3 bad habits they have, or even just one bad habit, and be able to fix it, and they acknowledge that and they go, oh wow, okay, I never knew I needed to do that, or I never knew I needed to brake earlier so I could be on this cone. I always tried to stuff the car in on the brakes or whatever. And then they see that, they see the effects of that and they go, wow, that it really opens their eyes. So I guess I at least get that out of it.
Yeah, I love the fact that, hey, you're helping somebody, and it's so funny that feeds back to you so much. You're like, oh, wow. And that's my hope for the podcast, is it can at least give people hope that listen to these things and you'll find somebody hopefully you can relate to or try something. Although I warn you, if you try 8 things at once like me, you'll be slow for a while. But something can help you. Hearing David Whitener and Kim go, yeah, we weren't good for a long time. Now, they put in a tremendous amount of work that you might not pull off in one season. But they become really good because they put in the work, they got the mentoring, they got the coaching.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it works. I mean, this is basically the same concept as an Evo school, right? I mean, you have different people on, and you ask them these types of questions, and you get different answers, and you get different responses. And they echo well with certain people and not so well with other people. And Evo schools work in exactly the same way. You get, over the course of a weekend, you can get 4 different instructors, and something I tell you may not be the same as what Brian Peters tells you, or what Junior might tell you. They may pick out things that I don't, and I may pick out things that they don't.
You mean Brian may not be the answer? I don't believe no.
Well, obviously the answer is whatever he tells you is obviously working, because he hasn't put a wheel wrong in, 6 years? But, so let me change my answer. Just listen to whatever Brian Peters tells you.
What would Brian do here?
If you don't understand it, just ask him to say it again.
Yeah. Be like, no, Andrew, please interpret what the heck he just said.
Yeah. He said, go fast, don't suck.
Yeah, go fast, win everything. Unless you're in my class,
Yeah.
I'm going to go faster. Oh, one thing interesting that I'm kind of picking up on the looking ahead, and yet I'm going to have to ask James Yom and maybe follow up on the beginning of one of these podcasts. It seems like people who played a lot of video games, you don't turn your head because you never had to turn your head in the video game.
Yep. I think that's exactly what my problem is.
So I got the answer. VR. We need the VR headsets.
Yeah, because I've even used I've had the triple monitor setup, where you can look to the left and right and see out the sides of the window and through the A-pillars and stuff.
Yeah.
I still don't do it. You're still based on just what's right in front of you.
And that's where we need more autocross.
Yeah, the VR is different because that is your whole screen. Now, I've seen some pretty impressive stuff of how that correlates to driving games, because it really is basically where exactly you look. So, what you see is very similar to what you see in a car, whereas when it's on a monitor or TV or whatever, you see the dashboard, you see the steering wheel, you see the end of the A-pillar or whatever. So you have this whole thing in front of you that's 2D, and you can see all of it at once. So I think that kind of distorts any ability to really even look ahead, because it's not necessarily obvious that you need to. Whereas the VR is literally just your actual focal point.
And the other part, I watched my first VR racing. It went from one guy with a plane. I was like, that's really cool. I want to go fly. To the next was he was doing a rally. So on road, dirt. And it was amazing how it's so easy to tell when the car is yawing. But in this case, his head was kind of bouncing around like ours would. So the car was bouncing all around, and he could look left while it's going straight. And I was like, oh my goodness. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't exist for the Xbox One. But for the PC, evidently right now, you can do that. So I'm like, oh, great. Now I want to get a setup for the PC that I don't even own.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid that myself. But yeah, it's the temptation is there, because it's neat. We just need somebody to actually make some sort of autocross specific type of thing. There was a game that was called I think it was called Live for Speed, that actually had an autocross maker. So you could actually, they just gave you a giant concrete lot, and you could put autocross courses down, and then go and drive them in these weird generic cars. But that's really, Forza I think has something similar, but
I've only seen the Bondront one where they've just got barrels on the road course.
Yeah, that's their idea of autocross, which is kind of weird, but it's actually it's I think it's still pretty fun actually, because again the same mechanics apply. So you look at when they have the slalom sections, it's the same approach, which is you got to try to get behind everything.
Yeah.
You got to try to get behind that first slalom cone, and you got to try to stay stay ahead of the car and try to backside all the cones as you go through the slalom. So, that it's good practice for that type of thing.
I did notice I left the cheat line on the line, and the thing I noticed instead of the road courses was, wow, you really have to always be setting up and looking at the next element. Even if you can only see one element ahead, you always had to do that. And even with the line on, it was not so easy, but it was so much better that I'm hoping I can get my 7-year-old to do that because if we get him to autocross, that's going to be a better payoff, I think, than just going down the straight at 110 miles an hour.
Well, and especially in that game too, it's funny because the autocross courses they have in that are so bad. Like, they're actually really bad courses. Like, if you ever had those at a local event, you'd probably leave. But
every Corvette owner would definitely leave.
Oh yeah, they would definitely leave. But it forces that, again, that forces that behavior. Some of them are really tight and really confusing. Well, you have to be able to look, 3, 4, 5 gates ahead and be able to kind of identify what side you need to be on each, and recognize that whether it's going to be painful or whether it's going to be fast or whatever.
Hey, you touched on slaloms. What is your approach to slaloms?
So slaloms, I think of them as a corner. So they're a corner in a straight line. So in a corner you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? So you go around the sweeper. You usually have to slow down a little bit or brake at the beginning. Then you have this middle point where you're sort of off throttle. The car's taking a set. You're kind of waiting for the car to go through the sweeper. And then you've got the exit where you're trying to get on the throttle and you're trying to come out as hard as you can. But you approach the slalom in exactly the same way, or at least I do, which is I'm usually checking up at the beginning of a slalom. So, I mean, we're talking like traditional like 5-cone slalom or something like that. Like the typical ones you'd see at a local, not like the flat-out ones we usually seem to see at nationals. So, you have to check up a little bit at the beginning, get the car settled, and then there's usually a point where I'm just kind of maintaining speed and trying to find the cone that I need to get on to where I can be on the throttle through the exit. So whether that's cone, out of 5 cones, whether that's cone 4 or cone 3 or whatever the case is, I'm focused on getting the car settled, get the car steady, and then focus on coming out hard. Obviously, how the elements are arranged in a course can change, and that will affect that. But I definitely try to avoid the trying to drive the slalom as hard as possible type of mentality that I see a lot of people do, which is, go in at 1,000 miles an hour and brake and gas and turn and brake and gas and turn and brake and gas and turn, and the cars gets all out of shape. And then they forget to exit. They worry about trying to get out of the exit. So like the West course was a good example of that type of slalom, where you had to be, you didn't really have to check up too much at the beginning. I think I did in my car, but you had a lot of space to come out. So you had to get on the throttle like 2 cones before the end of that slalom, and you could carry it all the way through. Yeah,
what you said is what I keep hearing from people over and over. Brian Peters, same thing. Although, give him a little crap. He's like, I knew I shouldn't have said you never brake in a slalom. You just clarified it correctly. A typical slalom, equally spaced, let's say 20-something paces on the tighter side, diving in there is so dicey. And that's where, and talking to Tom Barry, it sounds like we are more of we're risking a lot by going into those things hot. And it really hit me how those of you that are so consistently fast, you're all saying the same things. You're usually going to check up, you're going to get in there, and once again, I do key on coming out fast. If there's a fast section or fast offset, you want to come out of that slalom as fast as possible, or the finish is right there.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it mid slalom. So don't charge in. The way Tom puts it is awesome. Like, don't. It's a lot of risk to try to go in there at super high speed and then try to somehow get it under control. I mean, again, you'll stick that maybe 1 out of 10 times, and then maybe think you can do that all the time, or maybe just the layout of the slalom lets you get away with that. But if I need to check up anywhere in a slalom, I'll do it at the beginning. So I'll do it way before I may even think I need to.
And that probably keeps your line so tight, or you're so close to all the cones, because it's so much easier to do that because you're going to add the throttle and then not add any more as you need to.
Yeah, and the car will generally not pendulum, and have to be something that you have to chase, because every second you spend chasing the car through the slalom to try to get it settled is just time that you're throwing out, because I don't think many people are throwing their cars around too much or trying to catch their car and staying close to the cones. So if you're spending all your time catching the car, you're not actually doing what you're trying to do, which is get through the slalom pretty much as tight as you possibly can.
And tell me, in the Corvettes, all of a sudden I'm thinking, if they're not necessarily faster than, let's say, a Civic or some other ST car that's skinny, you guys are probably just trying to get through that and once again accelerate out where you can use the power again. But any place you can't go really fast, you're probably just trying to cut all the distance.
Yeah, I mean the slalom is weird, because in that sense, what you're saying is, and I agree with it, is that's not the advantage of a Corvette. I mean, you look at like CSP or something, they just they're just basically flat through every slalom and ridiculous stuff like that. So yeah, you work to the car's advantage. Going back to the conversation we had earlier, you work to the car's advantage. Okay, well, a Corvette's really wide and it's really kind of tricky to get it through a slalom. Okay, well, I'm just going to worry about trying to use 400 or 450 horsepower coming out. So I'm just going to kind of play it safe and try to not screw up the point where I can use all that power to come out.
Yeah, and that's where, once again, my assumption would be, they're going to be fast, they're going to have so much grip. They're going to go through all these elements a lot faster than cars I'm familiar with. It's just, I just keep reiterating this for myself, but also for other people. Don't assume that some car, just because it has more power, is going to be better in every section.
No, look at the smallest car. The smallest car is almost always the fastest. Look at CSP. The raw times that CSP can put down is outrageous. What other small car? Jeff Kiesel's E-Mod. That thing is basically a matchbox car with a rotary engine in it, and it's a lot of the reason that thing is fast is because it's like a 48-inch wheelbase or 52 or something like that. It's a tiny, tiny car.
Message to Bob Tennell: can you cut your car down? It needs to be like shrunk.
Yeah. Can you build like a 3/4 scale E36?
Maybe half scale.
Half scale. It'll be like a Bandolero circle track car.
Who's the guy that
with Halo headlights?
That one guy made the miniature Ferrari, right? That no one can fit in.
Yeah.
You just need to get him to make one just not so mini and not 12 cylinders. So maybe this is pretty doable. I mean, you could use the same engine, right? We could put the V8 or V6, whatever that is in there.
It only has to have the floor plate. Let's go through this exercise. Let's fantasy build an E-Mod BMW.
M3.
Because I think you have to have the floor pan. But other than that, I think it's open. So I think if you can somehow.
How much of that can you overlap, or how much of the floor pan do you actually need?
Is there a way to like abuse that role in such a way that you can cut? He'd be stuck with the wheelbase, which is, I don't know what the wheelbase is on one of those things, but that would be the hard thing to get around.
Yeah. So you say this, and I'm thinking there was an idea of taking a GTR and shrinking it. I think for E-Mod. So something tells me I don't know if you can shrink the wheelbase, at least the width.
I wonder if you could do it as a Juke. I wonder if those have a small enough wheelbase. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because like powertrain and stuff is open. Well, this is like the concept of the Jeep, because the Jeep is the only thing that has a smaller wheelbase than the Sprite. So that's why it's a freaking Jeep. So yeah, you got to find the tiniest. Tiny cars.
You gotta get a smart car, and then you're gonna wish you could make it bigger.
Oh yeah, there you go. But you need somewhere to put the actual motor.
Why are you sitting up so high? Well, I'm sitting on the motor.
Yeah, I gotta sit on the motor.
Whatever.
Yeah, so back to yeah, back to the point, which is, you look at that. You look at kart mod. You look at look at the course from, I think it was 2011, the Kevin Younger's West Course slalom course.
Thank you. I just brought that up, and I didn't know exactly which year. I think I was trying to assign it to 2013 or something. But yes,
I want to say it's 11. I want to say it's 2011.
The West Course that you would think somebody in F Stock or F Street would never design because it was so many offsets.
Yeah,
not so many slalom type features.
You look at all the cars that blew everybody's doors off. It was kart mod. Like junior karts, I think were like raw timing a lot of people. That was when Braun won in the Lotus. I mean that stuff is all it's all weird because it's cutting distance because you don't have to travel as far.
Yeah, left to right and left to right. They don't have, if they're 6 inches, that adds up very quickly when you do it 100 times or 50 times.
Yeah, so a 6-inch wide cone, depending on if your car is X amount shorter, that's, or narrower, I mean, that's you're taking that much less distance. So yeah, over the course of doing it 20 or 30 times, you probably have cut off 30, 40 feet out of a run. I mean, it's pretty significant. So that's why you got to look at the smallest cars. The smallest cars are the ones you got to be worried about, not the ones that are the most powerful.
And now, in case it's not already done, if I don't put it in the show notes, I want to go back and count how many left to right turns on Kevin Younger's course. I'm putting a note right here. It was insane how many back and forth and back and forth. I mean, I like courses that are that busy, but it's like I can't imagine trying to memorize that course.
I got so screwed on that course because I ran F Prepared that year in Mike Browson's Evo, and that we were so pumped to run that car because at the time, and I guess still, is that was like the most powerful car in the class. So it was a 400 wheel horsepower car that was 2,500 or 2,600 pounds. And it had 400 wheel horsepower, and you could use all of it against Z's that had 250, but they were a lot lighter, and as we found out, a lot narrower. Because I think that year I was second or third after day one, but I just got crushed on day two because the car is literally 12 to 14 inches wider than all those other cars, and I was like a second and a half back or something on day two, something horrendous. But yeah, it was that was painful in that car. For sure.
At least you knew. I mean, it's like, okay, sometimes I can't overcome physics. I mean, you can be alien and all, but you don't have that magic potion for shrinking the car.
Yeah, I can't cut distance on the basis of mechanicals.
You're like, it's just too wide. And that's where, I do love some spec racing. I'm still lobbying for it, obviously. Everybody out there who's got to, we'll break through sometime. I know it doesn't really work, but I love that thought because in that case, you're done. You would have to have several people not execute well at all to compete.
Yeah, I think street is really going to be the closest you're going to get to that for a while. So that's really the best, the best example of that. Although there's still, you still end up with course dependencies on a lot of stuff. We're going to see that a lot with the new D Street because now there's like pony cars.
Yeah.
Backmarker pony cars in there and twins, which I think are going to crush everybody. But
are both twins in there with the TRD package, or they're both in there without it?
The non-TRD FRS and the regular, well, I guess they're all regular, BRZ is in D Street now, as of 2017. And
then you have, ProSolo wise, what are they giving up on a launch? I don't know. But that's one thing I realized in Integra. Once I went up against the all-wheel drive cars, I'm like, wow, it was 3 or 4 tenths aside. So some courses, pro-wise, it did not matter what I did.
Yeah, it's going to depend on... Yeah, pros I think are going to be interesting because the twin would be my choice in 95% of circumstances. Although I think it's going to have kind of an uphill battle against pros just because it's such a flaccid vehicle. But against the WRXs that put 1.8 or 1.7 60 foots, and if they if they just have to get through a couple transitions and a turnaround, they might be able to kind of leverage that advantage all the way to the end.
Yep, there was a ProSolo in Packwood. It was like launch, go fast, turn around, come back flat on the gas. I was like, I had never been so demoralized that I was like, there's nothing else I know to do. I showed up in the wrong car and I can't compete.
Yeah, you have enough time to look over and watch the other guy accelerate away from you.
Yeah, and you're like, wait, there's nothing else I can do here. Oh, so entry versus exit. When you're walking the course and driving the course, you've probably heard other people talking about this. Are you focused on only one of those? Do you focus on mid-corner? What are you looking at?
Absolutely exit. So back to throttle, right? So I'm always looking at the point where I can get on the throttle soonest. So I'm always looking at the exit. The entry is much less important relative to the exit. So, I'll usually be much more gingerly, I guess, on the entry. So I'll brake a little bit earlier and try not to upset the car and just try to get the car in and try to get the car in on the cone and then try to come out as hard as I can. So I'm much, much more concerned about the second half.
What do you think you're braking throughout this zone? Are you trail braking? Are you coming off the brake easy? Are you hitting it hard?
It depends on the car. I mean, the front wheel drive and all wheel drive cars are just get the car. You got to get the car slowed down. So almost everything is a relatively hard brake. Like the Focus is you really got to weigh anchor to get that thing to turn. SCU cars are pretty much exactly the same way. They don't have any mid-corner grip. All they can do is stop and go. So, you have to brake hard and just, deal with the pain mid-corner and then use all the power on the exit. So, I focus on doing that with those types of cars. Now, with like the MR2, like the mid-engine cars, is definitely doing more trail braking. So, those cars kind of drive backwards in a lot of ways where I'm trying to set the car. I want the car to I want to have to catch the car a little bit on the way in.
You want it to rotate for you.
Yeah, I want it to rotate on the way in because I know it's not going to rotate on the way out. It's just going to, at least the MR2 is this way, is it just doesn't have enough power to overcome the rear wheels. So you got to get it rotated early so you can just lay on the power, whatever power is there, on the way out and be able to stay in it. I haven't driven a lot of Porsches, so I would think that the same kind of concept would apply there. But most of the ones I've driven have just been kind of pushy regardless. But
that's the biggest thing I realized getting into the rear engine car. I would get in there and get into a sweep or any kind of turn or 180, and I tried flooring it coming out, and it just pushed.
Yeah, you'll never get those things to really rotate on exit. Like, I think you really got to overpower the rear wheels. Like a GT3, I'm sure could do it, but I guess you really got to kind of set up dependent and kind of how hard and how early. I've driven like a Cayman, and it was like, man, that thing was just drove like the rear wheels are just glued to the, like it just wouldn't do anything. And I think part of it is the setup is, those, you look at like what people say about like 911s and rear wheel drive or rear engine cars and how they're always so tail happy. And it's like, I think that's in a track setting. I think in a track setting, you have a lot more momentum behind the car, so it's much more willing to rotate off throttle. I think for autocross, you got to set them up a little bit differently and drive them a little bit differently to really get that. You don't have that momentum to help the car rotate.
Surprisingly, what you're saying seems to be so true. Looking at the setup that we ran this year and talking with Scott Fraser, he's like, oh, you got like twice as much toe in the rear is what I'd recommend. I asked 2 or 3 people, like, that's a lot of toe in. And then he goes, does he track that car? I go, yes. He goes, it's probably very stable in the track.
Yeah, it's probably great. It's probably awesome on the track, and it's not as well for autocross. I think those cars would be way more, I guess, setup dependent than, say, a Corvette. Like a Corvette, are pretty setup agnostic. You could just, you can just run the same thing, and for street, track, autocross it's all
because
doesn't care.
Because you can power it with the gas pedal pretty much no matter what. You can make it rotate.
Right. Right. You can decide how scary you want the car to be in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's where I've only been into one probably 10, 15 years, maybe 12 years ago, and then Matthew Braun's. So I should have hopped in two back-to-back that were set up totally different. But it's amazing, you mentioned the GT3, when it's off lobe in second gear, you're not going to break the rear end loose at all. And honestly, so therefore, we were told afterwards, we should have been downshifting that pin turn at Nationals. In first gear, oh yeah, you're on lobe, that thing will scoot around for you. In second, I loved it because it was so gentle. It was like an S2000 down low. You're like, oh, all right, whatever. And then it just keeps all of a sudden like there's a turbo somewhere.
Yeah.
So
you can go to the moon in second gear on one of those things.
Yeah. So that was like, oh my goodness, maybe I can figure this out. But the whole entry turn, get the thing turned, is so foreign to me because there's no weight. So I kept, for a while there, I was just focusing on how much can I trail brake to keep the nose planted. Whereas James John was like, no, I don't do that. I try to like slow it down and get it rotated to begin with. Kind of what you were just saying. You would like some rotate, some have to catch it on the entry. It sounds like, and that once again comes back to setup. Can you get it set up to do that for autocross?
Yeah, when it comes to 911s, that stuff's kind of black magic to me. Again, that's not something that's not something I have a lot of experience with. I think I've driven a 996 GT3 once, but it wasn't set up that well. It was pretty much on the bump stops the entire time, and I've driven a Cayman, but that's about it. But both of them were kind of unimpressive. But again, I think it goes back to your point, which is kind of the general type of setup for those types of cars for track doesn't translate well to autocross.
Yeah. How about you, mid-engine wise? You're trail braking more. Are you playing momentum? Are you trying to plant the nose with braking and or lifting?
Yeah, so the MR2 was really receptive to trail braking, and I guess lifted. Actually, really not so much lifting. So I know the older MR2s were a lot more tail happy. So like the Mark II MR2s were could get pretty sideways with a good lift. The MR2 Spider was pretty gentle in that regard, but the nose would dart in really well on the brakes. So, and it didn't really care even if you braked hard. So even hard on the brakes, the car could still pivot, which I thought was kind of impressive. But it was really receptive to that, and that was really the best way to get it to turn, come in and just just load the nose a little bit, and then it unloads the rear, and then you just get right back on the throttle to catch it.
Yeah, those cars look like a blast watching you guys, and I don't know what it costs to get one going, but they just look like they stuck, or they stick like no other.
You know what? They drive awesome. So here's the thing. So I hate everything else about those cars. They look dumb. They're slow. They're kind of old, but they drive really well. And they're cheap and inexpensive. I got a local friend of mine that's actually they want to buy a nationally competitive autocross car. So they haven't. They've done a couple national events, but nothing serious. And they're like, "Well, what's a good car to buy?" Like they're kind of open to ideas, and they're looking like STR, S2000, things like that. I'm like, buy an MR2, buy an E Street MR2. I'm like they like I said, they kind of look dumb. They're kind of slow. They're not cool cars, quote unquote, but they're cheap to buy. I mean, you can buy them for $6,000 or $7,000 if you look for them for the right year.
What's the right year?
Well, you're looking for an 03 usually. So I think those were the first year of the good motor. So the earlier ones you don't want to touch because the oil consumption issues. You'll just go through motors left and right like Adam Norton does. And then that was the last year before they got softer springs with higher ride height. So 03 is kind of the sweet spot year. Now the later ones had diffs. You don't really need it since all the weight's over the rear wheels and it doesn't have any power. But they use 15-inch wheels. You buy some 205s that are $500 a set. When I was running the one in 2015, the owner got 200 200 runs out of the set, and they were still fat. Like I did the 200, I think run 199 and 200, and was top packs for a pretty sizable local event at that time. So they don't wear tires. There's a lot of good things about those cars if you could deal with the kind of the MR2 factor of it, I guess.
Do you think it would teach you much, or did you have to change like the trail braking or much else to drive those things fast? Because some people say the mid-engine, the front's so light, or it's a different way to drive a car like the Lotus, or is it just get in there and most people can adapt to it?
I think it's different. It's different from the Lotus. So the Lotus is much more. It's much more obvious that car's engine is in the back. So those things seem to have much more potential to push on throttle, especially like a regular Elise. Now, a supercharged Exige or something can rotate on power, but the anemic normal Elise can't do that so much. But they're also a lot twitchier off throttle or on the brakes. The MR2 reacts very similarly, but it's much more forgiving, much more. So it's definitely a good way, like a good stepping stone to maybe an Elise or a 911. But pretty much anybody can jump in and go fast in one as long as they understand what's going to happen when you do this. It's going to push no matter what on the throttle on exit. It's probably going to try to spin on the entry. But if you're aware of that, it's easy to catch.
So is that something where, knowing it's going to push, do you ever aim inside of where you want to end up and knowing you're going to end up there? Or is that just black magic? Yeah,
it's kind of more just kind of trying to drive through it. Like, it's just sort of accepting that it's more turning earlier, I guess, than anything is okay, I know the car's going to push, so I'm going to try to turn earlier. So at least when it pushes, my arc is going to be, is going to hopefully be aimed at a little bit better spot than it would be if it were, a front engine car.
Okay. Yeah, so now that I've driven the GT3, I'm like, oh my goodness, do not try to floor it coming out of these turns. No. Setup wise, can people get into those with single adjustable shocks? Just some kind of alignment, toed in or toed out or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's off the shelf Conies are, I don't know, like $600 or $700. You put zero toe, or I think some people run a little toe out in the back. There's camber bolts. You get a front sway bar that's like $200, and the muffler is like 2 feet of piping. So you just have a muffler shop build you one for a couple $100, or buy one off the internet for a couple $100. And you got, you're good to go with a nationally competitive car for like $2,000 or $2,500.
I don't even know why I think it would be fun, but something tells me watching them, I'm like, wow, once they get going, they stick.
They really do everything well. I mean, they're, especially at pros, like the best part about them is how good they are at pros. They're super consistent because it's literally idiot proof to launch those things. You pretty much just rev it up to 6,000 or 6,500 and just dump it, and then boom, you get a 1960 foot.
Oh yeah, and that's what's so crazy too, that they're going to pull a 19 when the Civics are in 2.3s, 2.4s.
Oh yeah, it's silly because it just the chassis kind of bucks a little bit and then it just goes. The first time I drove John Ryan's car at Toledo, the first day one was all rained out, but day two I was running bump class and I was paired up with like a B Street S2000, and I murdered him to the first corner. Like, he had to have been surprised because he did like a 2.3 or 2.4, and I was like, we were 1.9, like low 1.9s, and you just leave everybody for dead at the lights because there's just not really much wheel spin, and it's weird because it's a 140 horsepower car.
Well, hey, that's big power, buddy. And now I think about it from STS land, Civic land. Hey, that's a step up.
That's like 40% more than you have.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the sad thing. That is the sad thing. On the same tires, pretty much. How wide are those wheels?
For the 03s, I think it's 6 up front and 7 in the back.
Type R, all right. Type R. So yeah, in the back you could put more rubber if you wanted, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got into that random little bit there. I don't know why, but I think I would enjoy at least trying to figure one of those out.
Well, that's the thing. It's like it's so cheap, and they're not really unreliable. You have to reinforce the front sway bar mounts because those will have a tendency to rip out. But generally, they kind of hold together. And they're not expensive to buy, not expensive to prep. They do everything pretty well. You know, they're really underrated. But it's a good driving tool, especially for somebody who's newer. Like, you'll definitely learn how to drive driving one of those things.
Yeah, that and like you said, how many runs he got out of a set of tires. That's what stood out to me with David Whitener. They would buy the cheap tires just so they could go and get more runs and save their money to rent out the lot or something just to make hundreds of runs.
Yeah. I'll never. I'm kind of glad because I'm retiring the Focus now, so we can run our ND next year, and I am not going to miss the tire budget from that thing for sure because 3,000 pound front wheel drive, semi open diff, turbo car with no camber. It was. I think we went through 3 sets. I think we went through 3 sets of tires this year with 2 drivers, and didn't even do that much of a season. I mean, we didn't do any events other than locals and a few locals and nationals.
Wow. Yeah, and believe me, the Type R days. And after 12 runs on Hoosiers or 16 or 20, you're like, I want new front tires anyway. I mean,
didn't they run out in 6 runs? Like 6 runs, they'd be cycled out or something like that?
Well, you just didn't
cord at 12.
Yeah, well, all depended on, especially, I never ran the super 275s on a 6, but people did that. It was just, I remember showing up to Spring Nationals one time with all new tires all the way around. It's magic at first. It's like, but every pro, brand new fronts went on for Sunday. Because heaven forbid I make the challenge, they're going to be toast. I mean, maybe launching too high, but once again, you'd launch really, really high and spin them a bit.
No thanks. That's not for me. I know Jim Feinberg, when he was running his, he was telling me that, because he won so many of them, that he would be able to, he would always have like 6 tires in reserve ready to go because he would run them 6 or 8 runs or something like we were saying, and then those would go to the back and then he'd put new ones on for basically every event.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, that's not for me.
Yeah, to be competitive, when I took, I think, at least 14 tires to nationals for the pro finale and nationals that last year, and I was done no matter what. I'm like, I'm going to win this class. Yeah, and they all fit in the car. Oh, and that's one thing, a Jim story. So they got their car, I drove my car all the way to DC for the pro. And I don't know why. Oh, I probably wasn't used to being at sea level. I am launching at like 7,000 RPMs or something. And they start copying me. Well, I sucked at that pro. I was probably overheating the tires. Plus, it's like a fishbowl. Like, I wasn't used to all this, like, what is it, camber? The lots were not flat, let's just say.
Yeah, it's very much on a hill.
Yeah, and the surface was changing. They'd have like big patches of areas that were different. I mean, I totally sucked compared to what I thought I could do. But I gave them, they years later, like, yeah, why were you doing that? I was like, I don't know. I said, but afterwards, Ann Hollis came up to me and asked me, yeah, you were a little, why were you doing that? You were overheating your tires. I'm like, could you please tell me that, like, during the event? So anybody sees me doing something really silly, just come over and say, do you mean to do that? And I might go, didn't realize I was doing that.
Yeah, don't do that, do this.
Yeah. And that's where my one shock story, he ended up buying the shocks from Dennis Healy, and those were the only shocks we made an adjustment, and the car would then break. They had so much compression that you'd hit the brakes and the car would kind of dive and then just skid. Jim said those shocks were terrible. He said they couldn't figure them out, and they took them off, and they got rid of them.
That's awesome.
That's another thought, is if you get shocks or something and you don't like what they're doing, get somebody else that has a similar car, the exact same car, and try their settings and see if they think it feels the same, with the same alignment usually.
Yeah, for sure.
So take us through Pro Solo for you. You went to that first one as your first like national event, and it seems like you were hooked. Yeah.
I don't know. I love the format, but I've always thought I've never been that good at it. I'm really bad at launching. So I try not to. I guess I learned to not really focus too much on the launch, and that's why I love the MR2s for pros, because it took all the challenge out of launching it. To be quite honest, I mean it was like it's like launching an all-wheel drive car. You just kind of bang 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 bang, and then just dump it, and then off you go, and it does the same thing all the time. But as far as general mentality, I mean, I guess I don't really approach it any different than how most people do, which is, it's really all about Sunday morning. I don't really try to play too many games or anything at the lights or anything, but mostly I just try to focus on myself. Now, starting out, the ProSolo format's tricky because you're not used to having somebody line up next to you. So, and especially when you're newer, you're usually lined up against somebody who's, chances are, been doing this a while. Because that was kind of an eye opener for me at my first one. Because I would line up against Corey Ridgick or Siley or somebody else who was doing really well in STU at the time, and they're just banging off the two-step next to me, and I'm like, what do I do? What light am I supposed to go on? And then bog the car, and then they take off and they leave me for dead. And then I remember the first time I was like, I almost stalled the car on the line because I was like shaking. My leg was shaking so much I could barely even keep the clutch down because I was like so nervous and excited. It's the nice thing about the ProSolo format is it's still like that. Like you can still have a lot of nerves because of how it's formatted, which makes it fun. As far as the super challenges go, though, I don't really put too much stock into it. So much of it comes down to just dumb luck, and I think a lot of it too comes down to just not caring about how well you do.
Yeah, no, that's what hooked me. I was like, oh my goodness, I get these extra runs, and I now have to figure out this whole other format. And I mean, I've made every mistake possible, probably more than once sometimes. And that's why I drive across the country. I don't do many tours, but I get to do 12 runs. I get to try out all kinds of things on these 12 runs, and then hopefully make the challenge.
Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth it to do that stuff for pros. Yeah, I think I've pretty much pulled every dumb thing you can do too. I've rolled out of the lights in challenges. I had that happen in Jersey in 2013. I was staged, and the staging light on the left side was had a very slight hump. And every run I remembered that I had to put the e-brake up except for this run, and I rolled out of the lights. I rolled out of the stage lights as the lights were coming down, so I managed to actually get staged and greenlit on the way out. So, and I didn't know if that counted or not, so I just went and did the run, and I came back and they said, oh yeah, that's actually a DNF, but I'm like, okay, well that's kind of boneheaded of me to forget that one little thing that I somehow managed to do right every other time, but
I was going to ask you if
that's how it goes.
You do use the e-brake. One thing I would recommend is I do it at everything. So local events, non-pros, I pull the e-brake up before I go.
See, I don't do that enough, and that's a good thing because I don't get enough practice on it. So when I go to DC or Jersey or wherever there's an incline, I usually have at least one snafu where I get my wires crossed and then forget to put the e-brake up and roll out of the lights or do something dumb like that. So I need to start doing that all the time. Plus, it seems like, and this is one thing I've noticed with the ND too, is that car has like a hill assist that you can't turn off, and it kind of makes me wonder if I need to start doing the kind of the e-brake launches for everything because I'm afraid of launching that car with the brakes on.
So the hill assist, which I've looked at the new WRXs, it has that, I guess. So it's putting the brakes on for you so you don't go rolling until you, I guess, put so much gas or throttle into it. Maybe it releases them. Yeah,
well, it's a certain amount of, I don't know if it's a certain amount of clutch or if it picks up wheel speed or something like that. But with the ND, if you put the e-brake up, it turns that off. So in other words, if you're sitting on a hill and you let your foot off the brake, it'll hold the car there. If you put the e-brake up and then put it down real quick, it'll release the brake. So that will release it. But I'm afraid of kind of local events where if you launch off a slight incline, it holds the car. If it's going to launch off the brakes, I have a feeling that's not going to be good for the car. I know. I think Danny and James Yam had a similar problem in Wilmington with their WRX because Danny didn't know to turn the hill assist off because he was doing like 2.2 or 2.3 60 foots. And they couldn't figure out why, and then they called somebody or somebody told them, like, you got to turn the hill assist off. And they're like, oh, like, yeah, you're basically launching the car against the brakes, which is, because can only end poorly.
Hey, another way to heat up the brakes, right?
I guess, or heat up whatever is connecting the wheels to the transmission.
Yeah, but
that's in all the wrong ways.
That's a lot of brake on for quite a while because those cars pull what 1.8s and 1.9s or lower.
Yeah.
To 2.2, yeah, that's not very good electronics that they're supposed to turn off once you launch.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, public service announcement for everybody. Make sure
your hill assist.
And
Turn off your hill assist.
Off always, right? Anytime you're autocrossing, before you launch.
Yeah.
Or
figure out how to turn it off. Like again, the ND doesn't have an ability. Well, at least if there is, I haven't found it yet, but it doesn't have a separate way to turn it off. So
you're thinking e-brake. You're hoping the e-brake disables or disengages it, and off you go.
I'm hoping that when you pull the e-brake up is when it actually disables it. I mean, obviously you can't actually test that on a hill, but if you maybe you could.
Maybe the first click or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I'll try that tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe you'll find a switch inside there. It just hits a switch or something and says, "Okay, we can turn that off."
Yeah. And
then you put some tape over your switch so you save your brakes and your transmission and your everything.
Good call.
Like it's good. So look, hill assist. Never would have bought up hill assist, or that I barely even knew what it was.
Yeah.
So in autocross land, do you get the shakes when you finish a good run?
Oh yeah. Not as much as I'd like to, but yeah, I get that feeling a lot. Well, when the time comes, I guess. We had a local event that was like that, where when I really hit all my marks, I can do that. But most of the time, I'm too busy worried about beating myself up over stuff that I don't have a tendency to do that sometimes.
Yeah, you were saying you're hard on yourself. I feel like that. People are like, oh, you did great. I'm like, well, I could have done this better. I mean, it's kind of sad to admit that sometimes I'll win things and be like, well, but I didn't do this right. That may be part of people that are competitive, maybe.
No, I'm a baby about it. Like I get mad and throw shit and stuff like that. So, but I look at I'll look at video and be like, oh, I was 6 inches off there, 6 inches off there, 6 inches off there. So, and like people tell me like, oh, the run was still really good. I'm like, well, yeah, but there was still a lot of time left out there. There's still a lot of room for improvement.
And that's what I want people to realize. There's probably never hit all 50 cones or beyond all the cones. There's always that room for improvement, and I kind of feel like the people who are winning, they're just closer on average to all the cones at the limit of grip on a good line.
Yeah, there's no perfect run, right? I mean, I don't think anybody's ever done a perfect run. But the idea is to get as close to it as possible. So, I want to be as close as possible to a perfect run. So I guess over time, and this is kind of building up the competitive spirit, is trying to be hard on trying to find those things where it's like, I can't really leave that time out there. You never know what might happen, that, weather comes in, or, you cord a tire or whatever, something that, doesn't let you fix that mistake. So you got to try to make it as few mistakes as possible.
You're basically nitpicking to, once again, know that you always have something you can improve, you said earlier. You can always learn something. Hey, look, I was off right there. I got to try to tighten that up.
Right, exactly. And then try to extrapolate that into a learning experience.
Are you looking at your videos after events?
Yeah, I usually am. And that's usually where I end up really kind of doing the critique. Now for national events and stuff, I'll look at it the day of, like when I'm running, or the night of, or whatever. Locals, I'll just kind of wait till I get home. But
for the big events, do you look at other people's videos before you run if you can?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially if they've already, especially if they're running the course that I haven't run yet. Then that night I'm usually spending a good amount of time studying that video, which is kind of interesting. I mean, how much that's sort of changed within the past few years of good cameras being readily available, that you can find pretty much anybody with video to study from. And
YouTube at this point, people upload them right away.
Yeah, you can find them the after the first day for sure.
You'd be like, I can get 100 extra or 200 extra views if I upload this today. If I'm the first person up there.
Yeah.
I'm going to get 100 views. It's going to happen. So you do that. Once you walk the course at night, are you going through that course in your mind before Nationals the next day?
Yeah. Not as much as you'd think. I mean, I kind of treat it like it's any other course. So, if I've walked it enough the night before and I have a good memorization of it, then that's kind of enough. And I try not to get into the habit of overthinking things, because I will have a tendency to do that with everything if I give myself the opportunity to. So I just kind of leave it as, okay, do I know where I'm going? Do I know where to be? Okay. Okay. Well, then I'll check that in the morning when I do the morning walks. And kind of leave it at that.
So your tendencies to overdo it. So you're like, no, I can't let myself do that. I've got tomorrow.
I just got to trust. I got to trust myself. I got to trust myself. So, and that's not always as easy as it sounds. And I think a lot of people have that issue too.
Oh, I surely do. I change things.
Yeah, and it's like, well, I'm doing this, but so and so, this other person is doing something else, and then you think about that, and you're like, well, what if that's the right way to do it? It kind of turns into this downward spiral of, well, am I doing this right? But I guess the thing to keep in mind is everybody's thinking that. So, I've lost track of the amount of times people have come up to me and said, oh, well, you're doing this. Well, so-and-so is doing this other thing. And they really think that this other person is doing the right thing.
And my thing is, do they even know what the other person does? And the example is, secondhand, Andy Hollis is doing this. I saw the data. And then I'm extrapolating that to my car, which is not in the same class or the same car, and I'm going to change my braking pattern because of that. I mean, right. That's how easily gullible I was. Like, oh, I should try something else. Yes.
Right. Well, and it goes two different ways, right? So it's either it can go, well, actually three ways. So it's either the one way is, okay, that really did turn out to be the best way, or it turns out to be, okay, well, maybe they don't know what they're talking about either. So maybe they don't know, and they think that's what they're going to do, but they don't think that's maybe not actually the right way to do it, or they do it by mistake, and then people think that that's the way to do it. So somebody goes out and does something, and then you say, oh, why did you take this line this way? I've had people ask me this, and I go, I didn't mean to do that at all. It was there's some secret hidden in this certain line I took. I'm like, no, I didn't mean to do that at all. It was, I got laid in this element before, and I was kind of forced to take that line. So that kind of stuff can get muddled sometimes.
Yeah, people should go back and listen to Bob and Patty Tennell. I followed him around the course, not knowing that on his first walk, he walks in the middle of the course. And I was like, this is Bob Tennell. I'm driving his line, and that was not a good divisional.
Right, and then you have people, like other people are at the event, they come to you and they're like, I saw Bob Tennell walk in the middle of the course. He's like, that must be the fastest line. It's like, and then it kind of turns into that whole thing. It's like, well, okay, well, maybe not. It's like let's look at this. Let's take a step back here.
Yeah, and that's where I wish I would at least ask somebody, or more importantly, asked him, which of course I did years later, or some point later. And that's where my whole not walking the course of looking ahead. And I interviewed them, and he's like, that was the best autocross of my life when I didn't walk that course. But Coors Field was always slaloms, offsets, turn around, come back. And I talked to Kevin Youngers. He told me the 2 or 3 things to look for. But because of that, I still drive the way I drive and prepare because of an assumption I had that, hey, he doesn't walk the course and doesn't need to, and he can beat us all.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an experiment that I now have adopted, but I'm now going, oh, can I please walk it? And at Nationals, I guess this year I walked more than twice each. But I've gone to Nationals and said, nope, I'm doing like local. I'll let myself walk it twice.
Yep.
And okay.
And here's one other important thing on walks, since we're talking about it again, is walk by yourself. That is like, I cannot stress that enough, because you go and you get your walks in with your, the people from your region or people you haven't seen, and you say, hey, what's going on, and you go around the course, and I mean, you get to the end and you realize you have no idea what you just walked, and then it's like, oh, okay. So it's so important to get those walks in by yourself, whether it's one or two or however many you need. You really need ones where you can actually focus, and you got to not be afraid to turn people away too if they come up and want to make small talk or whatever. It's okay to say, hey, I'm trying to focus on this, so I'll talk to you at the end or whatever.
Catch me after this. That's one thing I see people doing, and I try to do this. I will walk so much of it, stop, and make sure I can go, okay, what do I do there? And sometimes I look at it. I'm not usually closing my eyes and making all the inputs. I've tried that. I've copied people and tried that. But I'm at least going, okay, do I know it? And I'll walk the next section and go, okay, do I know this up to here? And I kind of do that at night. Do I really know this course of where the heck at least it kind of flows? I may not know every single slalom cone. And then at the very end, I'll stop and I'll look back to the beginning and go, okay, I'm going left, right, left, right, left, right. Oh, yeah, look there. That's point number one that I really care to pay attention to look over there. And the other little tidbit is, when I'm walking, I turn my head to where I want to look ahead. And I do it like 3 or 4 times in a row. Like I just stop and repeat that look. Like you're going to look ahead and then look back to where you're at. You're going to look way over there and find that one cone you think you care about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I walk it like I'm sitting in the car, so I leave myself space like on the right and stuff like that. And I do the same thing, is I try to look where, okay, well, here, what do I think I'm going to be doing in the car when I'm going through this section, and where am I, where do I want to be looking, and try to figure out where I need to be looking before I get there. So that way I can kind of figure out how to translate that in the car.
Yeah, and once you said you focus on the exit, so it makes total sense. I'm looking over there because that's my exit. When Brian Peters said that, I'm like, I don't know if I've ever realized. I guess I pay attention to exits, but I never would have told somebody I'm mostly focused on exits. But yet I know if the exit to, at least at Nationals for the pro courses, seems like we always go out, we take a left, then we go offsets, take a left. I always know when we come to these lefts, that's where I'm really looking ahead to see how far out can I go and how much braking has to get put in there. So it is kind of the exit of that to get set up for the next section. But I never would have verbalized it like that. And so many of you guys have. I'm like, wow, I should think more of that than even the entry. I could pull a John Ames, okay, be tight on entry and just really focus on that exit so you're set up well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, let me know any other wrap-up thoughts, people you want to thank?
Mostly I want to thank, well, I kind of talked about Sam earlier. So I thank him for all of his support through the years. And I guess I want to thank my girlfriend Maria for being pretty good support this year, and also being a really good student. I think she's probably the best, I guess kind of the best project I've had so far, because she really first started doing national events last year, and really struggled a lot. And we were able to figure out a lot of things with her driving. We put her in some Evo schools this year, and she went out and won a national championship. So I feel pretty good about that. So, but yeah, other than that, that's pretty much it.
Thanks for listening. I think that helped you kind of know, like, oh, this person said that, and I can relate. Or, oh, I didn't even. How dare I not ask? Which foot do you brake with?
Oh, I'm a right foot breaker. I was wondering when you were going to ask this question.
People have been like, I know it's coming up.
I had this one prepared.
So I almost don't want to ask anymore because people are like, I know it was coming up, and probably, I bet if we look, 90% of people are right foot breakers, maybe 95.
Yeah, so I did both. So obviously I started as right foot braking. When I had the STU car, I started left foot braking, because everybody who was better than me said I should be. So I'm like, okay, well, so I should be left foot braking. What I found out is that I was using it as a crutch. So I was using the brakes a lot more than I needed to or should have been doing. So a lot of elements where I probably didn't need brakes, I was using the brakes or maybe brushing up against them by accident or whatever. And I just didn't really find it to be all that helpful for even for a all-wheel drive rally car.
Being even turbo is, I guess, the bigger thing I always point out.
Yeah. So, well, and you talked about this previously, which is, kind of holding down the brakes and trying to build the boost. Well, my thought is, well, why wouldn't I just get on the throttle sooner and start and kind of, I guess, take advantage of the lag time for it to spool up without the hindrance of the brakes. So that was kind of what I at least decided to do, which is rather than try to build boost on the brakes, just get on the throttle sooner, and the car's going to lag, but at least the brakes aren't going to hold you back from accelerating at all.
And as I told Tom O'Gorman, I bet I'd find it hard-pressed, although it would be a fun experiment, to get an all-wheel drive car, get a couple of you guys the right foot breakers and a couple of left foot, and just, especially with data, and say, hey, can we, even, that's the ultimate case of, let's say, lots of turbo lag, can we prove it works? My friend that was at Honda Performance, he said when Indy went to the turbo engines, their number one driver went from first to third. And they showed him in the data on that car, of course the spool time probably is forever, they said, look, you're that much later to gas, and therefore you don't have the boost necessary, and that's where you're losing it. But I think in autocross land, I mean, I did it because that Evo, it was an S4 bi-turbo, I would be building boost about a second and a half, I think, at least in my mind. I don't remember if I had data then. I would be on the gas pedal about a second and a half before I wanted to really go, so that as I was all the way off, I guess I was trail braking hugely, it would already be going. But then what's crazy is knowing the boost is there, you would have to back off. So maybe the benefit that I assumed was there wasn't really there because that slow buildup is probably actually good for mid-turn getting out.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to say because it's actually getting a lot more rare to find people who are really good at left foot braking. There's not that many of them out there that are really really amazing at it. I guess. So
yeah, I can't think outside of ST.
Somebody...
Yeah, Jason Frank, myself, Ron Williams. I don't know who else is a prominent left foot braker, and we're all in front wheel drive Civics.
Yeah, and it's that's a handful of people. So it's hard to say. I'm sure I could totally be proven wrong. I don't think there's I don't think it matters personally because I came off of it because I can tell you when I stopped doing it was basically when I went to nationals in 2010, and it seemed to work out to not let the brakes. So okay, maybe I'll just keep doing this. So I like the. I guess I kind of like the. I don't know what to call it. Just the hang time, I guess, between going between the throttle and the brake.
And that's what I'm probably definitely scared of. I don't know why. Maybe it's a Civic thing. That is the area I want to have. And honestly, with this video game setup now, I was like, oh, look, I can do it here. I can just lift and the little car rotates and add gas. So yeah. I'm really hoping I can get the seat time right here to actually be able to train myself not to do it. Because by default, I've done it for probably 12 or 13 years. It's just what I do.
Yeah.
But once again, wanting to get better, wanting to learn and evolve, I'm like, this is something that I want to try. I don't know how many other people at Left Foot Brake would want to dare try it. But I think people are getting the gist that there are so many fast people that right foot brake, as in most of them, that even in these turbo cars, you guys have one in them. You, Tom, you're not left foot braking, and it doesn't seem like. I assume some people are left foot braking, and they're not catching you.
Yeah, I think it's still, it's kind of it's a numbers game, right? If 95% of people are right foot braking and 5% of them are left foot braking, it's hard to find the people who are or find a lot of good data that supports. Oh yeah, this these people are really good at left foot braking, and
Yeah, because all of a sudden the top 1% is you have to have so many more. There's not enough people in the field to even find good left foot brakers.
Right.
Good way to think about that. No, I appreciate all the time. You knocked it out of the park. I liked it.
I had a lot of fun. This is a good time. It's fun to just hang out and talk about driving cars around parking lots.
Thanks for listening. For the show notes and contact information, please visit autocrosstalk.com. There you can also subscribe so that we can keep you up to date on new shows as they come out. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes and subscribe on iTunes for the upcoming shows. You can connect to our Facebook page at facebook.com/autocrosstalk. You can share your thoughts, your insights, your questions, your suggestions there. Also share with your friends. Hopefully you found it entertaining and motivating, and hopefully other people will as well. It's been fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and check back next week for the next show.